The environment of Yu-Gi-Oh is that it's basically a playground for insane asylum people. Whether or not that's a good thing is your choice, your opinion, ultimately. I personally quite enjoy it, because that's definitely what I think the main appeal of a TCG is for me personally. As a person who, if you wanna try selling a TCG to, it would have to be that making decks within it is very fun. Is definitely a primary reason I fell off of Genius Invocation TCG, the Genshin Impact card game, is the fact that I don't personally find it very fun to make decks there. Like I said, there's really only one type of deck. So they made a game, they made the rules so it's a very interactive game when you're actually playing. But the deck building process is incredibly stale and boring. 30 cards, no more, no less, and you're limited to 2 copies. The fact that you can mulligan as well contributes into deck building decisions as well. Specifically in that you don't have to worry too much about consistency due to a very lenient mulligan system being set in place in Genius Invocation. I wanna fucking rant real quick actually. It's an excuse to listen to this title screen song. So, I have a lot of tabs open. I don't need these open. I think it'd be better to. Here we go. Alright. I don't want to sound like a Yugi boomer. Yubel sets a precedent to me for support cards. I want if Konami wants to support old archetypes that have been dead for a long time, like Yubel, or in the case of Yubel, she's been dead since the moment she came out. But yeah, if they want to print support cards for Blue Eyes, for the Egyptian gods, or any other thing like that, Yubel is a precedent, as well as Voiceless Voice. But like on the topic of Voiceless Voice, I want to talk about card art. I don't want to sound like a Yugi boomer here, but I am definitely gonna sound like a Yugi boomer. So this is Low. Look at her. She's pretty, I suppose. And here's Skull Guardian. They're pretty cool, I suppose. Looks very fat. And the pose is very generic and boring. I'd argue the same for Low as well. So this is the original Skull Guardian. And this is the original Low, Nobox's Prayer, which is the ritual spell needed to ritual summon Skull Guardian. compare these. I don't know, but like, I really, really like the way Skull Guardian looks here, as well as Navox's prayer. The the praying position. The background is still boring as fuck. I think that's always been a problem with card art for Yu-Gi-Oh, but the background is always gonna be boring for a lot of cards in card games. Like the determination. Here Lo is just looking at us. Like this pose gives us nothing. It looks pretty, but there's no character here. Same with Skull Guardian here. Look at how threatening the Skull Guardian looks here with the side view rather than the generic boring ass front view that makes him look like a fucking fat ass. And the slight boob window and the blue skin that he's showing off. Again, I don't want to sound like a Yugi boomer. I only found out about Voiceless Voice on my own while I was trying to come up with decks for Ruin. Obviously, I came across incantations and megaliths, but one of the decks I came across was obviously Voiceless Voice. And of course, I learned that Voiceless Voice is actually a meta deck and should be used on its own archetype rather than to try to force out Ruin. And of course, it eventually led to me making my own deck, which sucked. And then I followed a guide, and now it works a little better because it's running a lot less Cyber Angels. Yeah, the primary problem was I was still forcing Cyber Angels to work as well. Again, I am not a Yugi boomer here. I'm not feeling nostalgic about these cards because again, I have never known about these cards until just recently when I got back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Myself. Even though I was playing at the time Novoxus and the original Skull Guardian came out. Anyway, deck building is fun in Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess one thing I don't personally like, and I'm not sure how many people would agree with me on this. In fact, this might be a bit of a hot take, but I really do not like the extra deck. I do not like I don't like slotting in cards in the extra deck. I guess it's sort of like the same reason I have, uh, for why I think Genius Invocation TCG deck building is boring. It's very limiting. So you're limited to only 15 size, and in the modern meta, you really don't have a choice but to run 15. Any less, and you'd be a genuine fool. I don't have a problem with the small size. In fact, my problem is that I think there's too many cards to put in the extra deck because those are 15 cards you're forced to play, unlike with your normal deck where you can choose to run as many or as little cards as long as it falls within the minimum and maximum range. Of course, you would mostly be running for minimum size for the most part. Again, they still technically follow the usual rules of, up to only 3 copies unless stated otherwise within the ban list. But yeah, I think the extra deck is just really bad. And with how prevalent it's gotten into the meta game, there isn't much we can do, and in fact, it is one of the few ways right now the meta is being kept mostly kind of in check. Because the extra deck is something you don't need to be lucky for. You can always access it. Technically, no, not necessarily, but for the most part, it really does kind of just work like that. The mechanic really does, the extra deck does just work like that. I'm still a bit of an advocate that if they would add another extra deck mechanic, it shouldn't be a monster. The game's been long overdue for innovations outside of monsters, in my opinion. The Sky Strikers is an amazing archetype, I think. For this, where it's an archetype that literally doesn't run any monsters. The recent Runic Mill Stun archetype is really cool too. Technically, they don't run. Their deck is mostly just spell cards as well. But again, thanks to extra decks, it is the natural state of card games to be more creature focused in the end, apparently. Like with a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. They can be so much more if they tried. Like imagine hand traps, but from the extra deck. Some kind of some kind of trap card in archetype trap cards that you put in the extra deck and can bring out as long as you meet specific requirements. They're like trap cards, but activated from the extra deck. Or I guess like hand trap cards, but activated from the extra deck. I feel like that would shake up the meta. Whether or not the idea I'm spitballing is gonna be healthy or fun or good, I don't know, but I want it to be a thing. Very badly. Marvelous rock, I suppose. Gravel I'd consider as dirt, since it uses a shovel to mine out. Anything that uses a shovel is dirt. Anything that uses an axe is wood. Anything that uses a pickaxe is stone. That's easy enough to understand for an organization method, isn't it? The important thing about an organization system is that you yourself are able to understand it. Of course, when you're working for an organization, that changes. Otherwise, though,
sports festival flashbacks. Season 2 of the anime also helped reinforce this idea when his color scheme showed to a wider audience his eyes. This theory got so popular that it was more or less accepted as canon and people operated based on it being true. Kamino is our first major climax of the series and serves as the end of Act 1. I try not
there's
to jump
still the
ahead a lot,
ammo
but I feel like I
box,
would be doing a disservice to the retrospective if I didn't mention the first core season. The first half of the
which
third
I have
season
no
was some of
idea
the
how it
best animated
works.
content of the entire series, and is more or less the reason why the narrative spawned at My Hero Academia peaked with the Kamino arc. The arc introduces an aspect of the series that is quite interesting, but apparently some people find annoying. Class 1A disagreement, but as we'll see way later, it's something to appreciate in the moment. We see the class debate the possibility of going to save Bakugo himself from the clutches of the villains, giving us a very interesting layer to their dynamic, effectively separated from the potential of being a hive mind. It also ties directly back into the moment during the Stain arc. feels the most strongly about the situation due to his own vigilante mission in the past holding up his fate. The same chapter also introduces us to something foreign in some shonen manga: consequences for our protagonist. His arms are badly damaged by his encounter with Muscular, described as a bomb exploding inside of him, with significant damage to his bones and muscles and even more severe damage to his ligaments. He is given some extreme news. Serves as our first major shakeup for the second act. Immediately after, we also get yet another subversion of shonen tropes and expectations. Bakugo Katsuki officially beats the Sasuke Uchiha allegations, which, believe me, were ever so rampant at the time, seeing as how this is also the spiritual
Oh.
successor to Naruto in the magazine. Not only does he beat some allegations, but it's our first sign of relief for Bakugo as a character since his meteoric fall in the final exams arc. All throughout the series, we see him act like a spoiled, mean, and egotistical kid, setting our expectations up for his swap here this arc. And those
Okay,
expectations
so
don't just exist for the reader, but for Shigaraki
how
as well. But
due
not
to the
only does
fact
he
that I'm
project our
using a
author ego
freaking
so
thingy,
violently, Bakugo isn't the only one who shows growth in that scene, however.
this is
This entire
kind of
plan of Shigaraki's to capture
worthless.
Bakugo shows his newfound competence as an ideological leader,
Which
taking
kind of
the
sucks.
potential
I guess
glimpse of
this
the
is
system from
technically
the ways in
another
which he
way
now
they
lives to
tried
replace the
reining
city that has
in.
created them. In addition, when
I
Bakugo
mean,
lashes out at Shigaraki in the explosion, Shigaraki doesn't retaliate. Stops his comrades from taking Bakugo. Where the elements hideout with Bakugo and press growth, we see a of regression and character. When back against the wall and his plan falls apart, he reverts back to that screaming, petulant man-child. Regression isn't an inherently negative thing in character writing, however. It can oftentimes be used to either contrast their current growth, as well as used to catapult a character to new heights. All for One's character introduction in not just the anime, but even the manga, is one of the coolest character introductions of all time. He walks out, one-shots every hero at the compound, and just floats in the sky like a hanged man, wearing his crazy Darth Vader mask, leaving our group of 5 kids sitting there, imagining only death in his presence. He also permanently injures the number 4 hero, Best Genius, who Bakugo had his internship with. He decides not to take his quirk because it would be too complicated for Tomura to use. Seems like a small detail, but this is something important that we'll get back to later. Before we get to the climax of this arc, I have 2 more things that I want to talk about. The rescue operation the kids perform for Bakugo is an extremely cool moment, and we get to see the closest of Bakugo and Kirishima, as he is the only one who can get through to Bakugo due to their established friendship. It's also worth noting that the adaptation of the scene in the anime spawned a lot of pretty fair takes about why Bakugo didn't just fly that high to begin with. However, for the anime, an animator once said they made him fly that high simply because it was badass. He doesn't go nearly as high in the manga. As All Might no longer has to worry about collateral, All for One also makes the same decision. Rogiri to warp the rest of the LOV out of the fight. Shigaraki gets sucked into the portal, screaming faster and telling him that he's not ready. At this moment, All for One essentially accepts his passing of the torch, will be discussing shortly. All Might's weakened form gets revealed to the masses, as they cheer
never
him
mind.
on without him
Whatever.
being able to hear it, and his heroic spirit presses forward until he hears something that shakes him to his
I have
core.
no idea where to.
Shigaraki, I All for One tells All Might the story of how he took in Shigaraki to groom him in the 80s, which also shows us a little about All Might's ideology as a teenager. What he felt was that his world lacked a symbol, pillar for society to rely on in times of duress. His pillar ideology on the surface seemed to have worked. Crime dropped, organized crime essentially went extinct, and he held 40 years of peace in Japan. We talked about this previously during Arc 1. However, this pillar ideology wasn't without its consequences. All Might's tenure as the symbol led to an overarching issue of complacency within Hero Society. The occupation of hero grew to be almost an assumption of somebody's future plans due to the prevalence of them. It became an easy job due to his existence. If he could solve things in a matter of seconds, what was there to be afraid of? Heroes and civilians alike grew complacent and suffered from a bystander effect. The core flaw of All Might's ideology shows its ugly head in his confrontation with All for One. What would have happened if that pillar collapsed? All Might was told at a young age that the heroes who are the strongest keep smiling no matter what. Just like All Might's, Nana Shimura's intentions weren't for that to be negatively internalized, but he forced everything behind a smile, as the pillar known as All Might toppled, and Toshinori Yagi lived on, which was another unexpected thing MHA managed to pull off. This was a fight you have to watch or read. Like, seriously, the strong word you feel for All Might in this is unlike anything else. Kamino seemingly spelled the end of All Might, yet he survives his fight, and gets to watch everything he built for 40 years crumble to dust. There will be much more of this to discuss in Act 2. What we come to see, however, is the end of All Might's pillar of justice ideology. simultaneously the end of All for One's reign of terror. What is ushered in is a new era, the idea of legacy, and the passing of two torches. All Might's fall signals an end to simple, self-sacrificial heroism. He instills his legacy and faith in the still young Prince Midoriya. He can only access 5% of his master's power and passes the torch as the next symbol of peace. But does this world need another symbol? All for One's fall signals the end of evil for the sake of evil, or comic book villainy. He instills his legacy and faith in the still young and inexperienced Shigeru Tomura, who still deeply mental, and passes the torch to him as this world's next symbol. But is he ready to operate in a world of master? Kamino delivers on what I believe to be a core theme of My Hero Academia, and this is why this event occurs at the end of Act 1. MHA is a story about the next generation, and Act 2 serves as a shedding of simple comic book heroism as the themes of the story only grow more complex when All Might and All for One simultaneously fall. In terms of meta, the finale of Act 1, when hype for My Hero Academia was more or less at its all-time high in online spaces, with the series performing at its absolute peak sales-wise, with Volume 10 bringing in a massive 456,000 copies in its first month. MHA took the world by storm, absolutely exploding in popularity at this point. The fandom grew massive in what felt like one night, with massive shipping community, general MHA subcommunities, and still sweeping every anime award show. It felt like it just couldn't get away from My Hero Academia. Hype was at an all-time high as people wondered what was in store for the series, since Pillar of Justice was gone, and the definition of evil locked up. As our two sons wandered the world with massive expectations on their shoulders, Act 2 would certainly be a turning point for both the anime and the manga in very different ways. Thank you everyone so much for watching this video. A lot of time and love went into this, and a lot of people worked on this. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so this can get out there to more people.
If you can say what you think it is about My Hero Academia that kind of has that lovely, overwhelming arc that just everybody loves and is very popular.
Just on a base level, I think the animation is lovely. You know, that's always part of the appeal. But I think culturally, superheroes are kind of a big thing right now. They're pretty popular. But what I really love about the show is that it subverts a lot of these superhero tropes in really clever ways. Like, for instance, the prodigies of Class 1A are the ones that deal with the most anxiety and like lack of self worth. So I just think it's a lot of really good character driven moments that you can really for as an audience.
Act 2 of My Hero Academia starts off in the middle of 2016, and the series is more or less a global phenomenon. When we last left off, we were at our highest volume sales of all time, with some extremely iconic scenes and characters. In addition, the first My Hero Academia games started rolling out, such as My Hero Academia Clash Heroes Battle, which is dead, just like every other game. We also saw the beginning of a multitude of MHA spin-offs, such as Vigilantes and Team-Up Missions. While these spin-offs definitely offer their own unique twist to the series as a whole, they fail to hold a candle to the main series quality. Speaking of holding a candle to the main series, we also get the first two movies of the series during this act. These will get their own section later, unfortunately. The adaptation would prove to be instrumental in the series' success, with Season 2 especially performing extremely well in both Japan and abroad. Needless to say, the series was printing money. Figurines, clothing, backpacks, you name it, there was MHA merch of it. I didn't dedicate any segment to Season 1 last video, but I'll try and make quick asides for anime seasons this time, since there are a lot more, and there's a lot more to say about them. Now, where did Act 1 leave off? In the micro, we had Midoriya coming to accept the consequences of his reckless use of his core, as well as the burden of one for all slowly closing in on him. Bakugo coming to accept that maybe being a shithead is bad, and Ochako coming to grips with her interest in him, and Shoto finally feeling like he moved through his abusive household. In the macro, we have the complete upheaval of the ideology keeping Japanese hero society going, as the pillar of justice and symbol of peace finally collapses. In addition, we see the end of simple ideas of heroism and villainy and move forward to an age of more nuanced methods of the two aforementioned concepts. Act 2 is quite an interesting time. To some people, it's when the series kind of grew up, in a sense. It demonstrates that MHA has quite a darker side to it. It introduces more mature concepts and themes. At some points, the tone of the series got so dark that Horikoshi himself stated that he struggled working through it. Act 2 also gives us MHA's second editor change. First ever Hitoshi Koike worked between June 2013 and June 2014. If you remember, MHA didn't start printing until July of that year. Basically, means that Koike and Horikoshi worked for an entire year on the first 3 chapters. Everything after the first 3 was edited by Kenko Monchi, who took over between chapter 4 and the school festival arc. We had MHA's best sales, movies coming down the pipeline, games releasing spin-offs in progress as we take our first steps into the next stage of My Hero Academia. Okay, not a necessarily strong arc to start us off for Act 2, and it's generally perceived as one of the worst arcs of the series. Surely this is something that can never be topped. It doesn't do anything egregious. I think the arc suffered simply by being placed after such an immensely strong stretch of the series, as it's not super interesting and kind of drags on. This change in quality is felt especially through the anime adaptation, as it did an amazing job elevating the source material of the Forest Training Camp arc and the Kami arc, only to then have a noticeable drop-off in adaptation quality, and made an arc that already felt like a drag even more severe by padding with anime original content that, to be frank, was good. It also saw a small decline in volume sales. However, this also could be due to the anime not airing at the time of the volume's printing. The arc itself has one standout moment among a string of just okay ones, but it's not all bad. The perspective series thus far has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of how we view My Hero Academia, and we're about to get a little critical. I want to reiterate once again that by the nature of reviews, this will be subjective. If you disagree, there is nothing wrong with that, and I don't want to rag on it too long, so let's get into the arc itself. Provisional License Exam, or in its shortened form, PLE, a lot for Class A's growth in terms of their abilities or capabilities. We see them come up with super moves and work towards finally becoming licensed heroes. Deku is in a state where his arms are ticking time bombs if he doesn't change his fighting style. In fact, people clown on this moment, but I think it's very understandable from Deku's point of view. He had spent his entire short tenure as a hero trying to imitate All Might. This would include his fighting style, so using his undamaged legs would not be a thought that crosses his mind. Pair this with the fact that our MC is a chronic overthinker, and you have a recipe for an iconically simple epiphany that will guide how he thinks about his own power going forward. See Deku mature his power set again, as he incorporates kicking into his fighting style. He also gets an upgrade to his costume, and in my humble opinion, I love Deku's costume so much. I love that every single part of it has some reason for existing. The gold suit is in reference to his mother's original design. The bunny mask exists to imitate All Might's pointy hair, and similarly, the respirator is to act as his never-ending smile. Incorporates some brand new arm braces that exist to reduce the strength of his arms, and some fancy iron soles to enhance the power of his kicks, and we'll soon see later in the arcs to come this symbolically enriching costume only gets more progressive from here. I think Deku developing this new fighting style is also another very punching reminder that he is now on his own, and instead of repeating everything All Might did to where we are now, he is slowly separating himself from All Might's identity, starting with his fighting style, and coming up his methods of heroism. Speaking of separating oneself from their inspiration, we see something similar from Ochako with this arc. Much like how she wanted to be independent of him at the sports festival, she makes the conscious decision to start rocking away her feelings for Midoriya and focus on her work as a hero to try and come at it by herself. What we also get to see in this arc, but also in the act entirely, League of Villains beginning to become more proactive under the new leadership of the now mentorless Tobara Shigaraki. We see this near immediately with this new act by Toga sneaking into the test to not only obtain some information, to get blood for future use. She encountered Midoriya, who, despite knowing that she wasn't Uraraka, still saves her regardless. This is what sponsored curiosity into Midoriya and Ochaka's relationship. It's worthy of being saved. Oh yeah, she sneaks in because there are other hero schools, I guess. I don't think that just like this cements the parallel development that heroes in League go through. Something we'll definitely get into later. PvE in Fighting Such an Act 2 begins to show us fights becoming a little more elaborate, this one still not being amazing choreography-wise. This can also go hand in hand with previous points about the simplicity of heroism and only being left behind in Act 1. By extension, so too is the simplicity of its fighting. We see the final fight that ends that generation of thematic simplicity quite literally be ended by two dudes punching each other as hard as they can, and the first major fight of Act 2 really a pretty decent choreography. As if out of necessity, the fighting styles of all need to evolve. Deku vs. Bakugo 2 is the very, very end of the original Hero License Exam arc, and is pretty much the only reason why people even think about this arc past from here. This fight is when we get to see Bakugo and Midoriya finally become actual rivals after years of just one-sided bullying, showcasing a type of envy that was once hidden building up inside of Bakugo that not only catches Midoriya off guard, but the viewer as well. All this time, he has been shadowed with the guilt of feeling like he is responsible for ending All Might, and his overwhelming feeling of inadequacy when compared to his childhood friend. At the core of Bakugo's being, strength and violence are two necessary components to him. Due to his upbringing, he saw strength as necessary, and that weakness was like being a burden on society. This is a prime example as to why, as a child, he can never understand the quirks of Midoriya Izuku, who, despite being powerless, still maintained a strong fighting spirit. Even after he was kidnapped by a villain group, his mother scolds him and tells him if he was stronger, this wouldn't have happened. Bakugo throughout his life internalized these feelings until Midoriya was a UA, and even a weak, quirkless nobody like him received praise for his accomplishments that have nothing to do with strength. What is Bakugo without his strength? To protect himself from that thought, he projects his self-perceived weakness onto Deku. Deku vs. Bakugo 2 serves as his inferiority complex exploding in his face. While I think Bakugo and Midoriya are cool individually, the portrayal of their dynamic here isn't exactly something I'm fond of. It's not just here either, of the series. We see previously in the final exams arc of Act 1 how their relationship is portrayed as a two-way problem of miscommunication and dislike of each other. In reality, it's entirely one-sided, just like this fight is. This fight has interesting choreography, which was massively elevated by the anime adaptation, and that's about the end of the interest of this fight for me. Deku vs. Bakugo 2 is a trend of a bigger issue in their dynamic, which is that Deku pretty much never gets his own input on how Bakugo had treated him. He gives his side of the story at times, like how he sometimes in the story about it, this is to dive deep into how Bakugo had made people all those years. His fight is a vulnerability and trauma to the others that he's not all friends with. This definitely partially plays a part in Deku's characterization of how he cares less about himself and more about others, seeing as how someone like Bakugo takes priority when it comes to their feelings. But like I said earlier, it is a disappointing trend for their relationship as to how hilariously one-sided all of his moments are. Even if you want to take into account the fact that this is Deku getting at being careless, where do you think the necessity for being so dismissive towards his own feelings came from? Who do you think it made him feel like his emotions don't matter? His kindness shouldn't be something freely given by choice, something he has to give other people. More on that later in Act 3. After their fight, All Might steps in and apologizes for not noticing how much pain Bakugo was in, which is also funny given how the same argument Toge places all the blame on himself for destroying his arms and not being able to save Bakugo. The same the same dynamic that All Might presents also serves the same function of doing absolutely nothing there, and it's the same solely for Bakugo's sake. And barely did that, perhaps later in Act 3, realizing some of the returning arc and implies that there are two sides of the same coin. He has All Might's heroism to make sure, but it's more accurately used in helping Bakugo the story edge that they should again, the fight also served as yet another side of the equally obvious ways the introduction of Bakugo as it ends up making him much more tolerable. Characterization beyond just being a piece of shit. Overall, the visual license is a hard most one of the most disappointing of the series. In a few stand-up moments, I can understand how it came to be, however, as following up on the Kamino arc is going to be a tall order. Now, there is a lot to say about the following arc, but I'll let someone who is a bit more passionate about it than myself take over for it.
After his nightfall, Alacrity has an injury, Silver has been scarred most of his life, really being able to walk all my sins to forgoes with health, same as saving others. This is called sacrifice, disregarding your own situation for someone else's sake, without detriment. And big sacrifice permeates the entirety of this arc. A lot of people find that very unsure. That was a lot of people also think about weak, shy, and just you're gonna say it's garbage, and these aren't necessarily quality for someone who's no very strong, yes, let me have I mean, looking at this one of the 5 full minutes. Just a possible, just that sacrifice I mentioned earlier, when the action happens, scarred, scared, choked, and it was guilty by its length of sacrifice and land.
completely forgot about the fucking jams.
State characters set beyond that. What heroism is and just whatever. Art is at its best, and while there's definitely nothing wrong with the filmmaker's supporting cast, she suffers from distracting elements are so approaching. He simplifies sacrifice in a different way than this because while Zeke now might notoriously sacrifice something good to help other people, Ricky sacrifices something bad for others. It's fear. Just like the zoo, the birth concept of guilt is by not shoving away fear, but facing him head on. But others don't have to. It's just great with all that energy and also comedy that has to separate his own ignorance from his own anxiety, or rather, making Manus out of his anxiety. But as stated before, this is a different character setting in as we have act. It's not like I highlight these characters, but there's nothing wrong with this. And so it is it's started thinking about that would matter throughout the story. Only a few months ago, she promised herself not to be distracted by the invitation. Rush and just focus on her hero work. Oh, yeah, she has a crush on Devin. I just forgot to mention that. How much hardcore she really capitalized on the fact that Devin was shot. Probably the first time in the story, going through the exact same trauma as when they both each other, venting to each other after the arc was over and how it was messed up. How those events she probably felt the moment. The opportunity was right there, but we're emotions. But she still does nothing. And she has the off-screen investigation. And yet just is enough. Jocko, main character, and a rescue hero, as her rescue off screen, like her arc is about learning how important it is to rescue other people. But Tamaki, someone who prior to this arc, it's a whole fight.
Also, we all know that Nedroid sucks, like really bad, right?
Yui is the top hero like in all of Japan. And Nedre is like what, the third best student in that school? However, unlike her contemporary, she gets almost nothing to work with. She's sort of been in the missing potential of a key kids that fills the slot, which is made worse in the next arc, where she's relegated to being a pageant participant. She's literally the top third prodigy in the entire country, and Horikoshi does nothing with that. Also, I'm just not gonna talk about Poppy. I really don't feel like talking about Poppy. Mind this with a couple of not the chapters, like literally that just solves this whole thing in like a page. And this arc is a personal mixed bag, but a forgivable one since this is Forty's first time making such a long arc. This is pretty much where the end. Stuck in the shadows of their boss's sabbatical, Shigaraki and his teammates begin a journey of discovering a world without all for one. One of Overhaul's bullets asked Togen twice whether or not Shigaraki told him anything of betrayal, and he said no, because it's true, he didn't at all. All he did was to trust him to stay true to himself and the message. They didn't need someone next to know what to do. They had to do was simply whatever they wanted. This is all made especially fast. Shigaraki come back when he would have never not only cares, but that emotional impact to motivate him. Overall contrast is in the fact that he's sort of our first example of a capitalistic villain, making corporate racing bullets to sell on the black market while giving antidotes to the heroes. His arrogance leads to him thinking that he's the only one that can affect the others in man. Life into a dying organization justifies his own actions to himself because he knows that externally he'll receive that same validation from the most important person. Well, overall behaves as a litmus test for both Shigaraki and Deku, to see where each of them are in the journey. More specifically, like Muriel to Deku, overall is supposed to mirror the exact person Shigaraki is supposed to become. A leader with a plan, a goal, and an idea, and a leader that treats his teammates as top priority. Both come out of the arc learning that they have much more to learn, but they're ultimately on the right path, emotionally. last but not least, Harry's probably the best female character in MHA besides Toga. She's a plot device, of course, but Tori doesn't hide it. Instead of trying to make her more than what she is, Horikoshi leans into this archetype has a natural place in the story, and place in the story very, very emotional. Her arc about overcoming trauma, abuse, learning her power doesn't have to be something so dangerous, but something that can help others, as well as learning she doesn't have to sacrifice her own emotional stability to save others. Not only great, but it directly parallels this to her helping someone like Deku help her, and they could act as a codependent, rescuing one another from each other's inadequacy. This is also cathartic for Suki because finally he got to save that little girl. She's an adorable side character that gives the series a chance to visualize trauma in a way that I couldn't before. Not only something tangible, someone who represents the series themes so well, but someone that doesn't overstep Deku's arc actually enhances it. I love her so much, man. Dark has a lot of flaws, like a lot of flaws, but it does such good setting for Suzuki's character along with Shigaraki's character, along with, yeah, admittedly the supporting cast, and somewhat, they're easy to forget. I'm sure both Christian do a great job at taking elements introduced in this arc and giving them all satisfying payoffs and resolutions. Wait, why did the music come on?
Thank you for this segment, Nia. If you like their style, make sure to check them out. They make video essays as well, and their link is down in the description below. Jumping back to the anime adaptation for the overhaul arc, while it still wins plenty of awards in terms of fresh direction, pretty impressive lighting for the beginning portions, and probably one of the best episodes of the anime, there is quite a noticeable drop-off, not only in terms of adaptation quality, but also in terms of public perception in English-speaking online spaces. With the Provisional Hero License exam already having a boring adaptation, it was an exceptional hit for the overhaul arc's adaptation to be only of decent quality to some. It was riddled with inconsistent character arc, long capable versions, and what some perceived to be an over-reliance on still frames. The Mirio episode was especially controversial due to it barely expanding on the source material, and doing so with more still frames. Infinite 100% more or less carried the series at award shows and farmed quite a few million views on YouTube. For myself personally, Season 4 was still passable, but definitely marks a downwards trend for the anime, especially when compared to Season 2. Speaking of Season 2, the overhaul arc in the manga also coincided with Season 2 of the anime premiere, which was largely responsible for the massive success the series saw due to an outstanding production by Studio Bones and their staff. Remedial Course is quite a small arc, and sets a precedent of some mini arcs in the series, for better or for worse, which we'll get to. To some, it's also incredibly boring. I think for being 7 chapters, this arc is actually quite dense in terms of setup for the rest of Act 2, but this is one of the first arcs where we don't really get anything from the League of Villains since their introduction, and for some people, it really shows. I'll get more into that in the next arc though, so let's just get into the Remedial Course. We get to see more development for the characters from the other schools that were involved in the Provisional Hero License exam, which is neat, but there are 4 huge points going forward for the story as a whole in this arc, which is funny for how short of an arc it is. People like to write off Remedial Course, but these are pretty big deals. The first point is that we are introduced to the concept of the quark singularity theory. Nearly 100 years ago, the idea of quark singularity was presented. The idea goes that as generations follow one another, quarks will continue to mix and evolve, producing stronger and more complex quarks as time goes. This increase in strength and complexity will eventually lead to instability, as the human body doesn't evolve at the same pace as quarks. MHA at this point didn't really feel like it had an end game in mind. Not to say that it wasn't thought out or structured, but this was the first idea that was planted into the story to make us go, oh, so this is something that has to be solved. It helps put together a better picture of where MHA is headed. The second is that Bakugo shows just how far he has come in this arc, as we get some nice emotional progression from him with the boss baby. The kid who clearly thinks he's above everyone else is a fitting character for Bakugo to speak to. He tells him if you spend all your time looking down on people, you'll never be able to see your own weakness. The implications of this are pretty obvious. Third is that this arc often goes uncredited for the introduction of this concept, but this is the first time we see the possibility of saving without fighting. I don't know how this goes unnoticed, seeing as how that's the entire purpose of the arc and the next, but it implants the idea in our head that maybe people can be safe without getting destroyed. Finally, number 4, which has some pretty massive implications for the series going forward. Horikoshi is an abuse apologist. Just kidding, but this is definitely something that some people took away from these scenes. We get a glimpse into Endeavor for really the first time in the series. All we have known up to this point is that he's an evil, abusive monster, but in my opinion, MHA does something daring here. It takes this absolutely reviled character and tries to humanize him without excusing his past actions and thrusts him into the forefront. Endeavor, a character who felt forced into passing the torch due to his inability to compete with All Might, based his hero ideology Enji and put his identity around strength. Oh, sorry, not that one. Enji Todoroki was clearly supposed to be left in our minds as a mental note of just how bad Bakugo could have gone had he stayed on his warpath of strength-based identity. It is no coincidence that the arc which shows us Bakugo's emotional development is also the one that displays the first sign of Enji Todoroki's. After All Might's fallen Kamino, Endeavor faces a wake-up call. He wasn't chasing this immensely strong All Might, but a skeleton of a man with fleeting power, and he still couldn't surpass him. This revelation put Endeavor's journey as a hero, no, his entire life into a new perspective. After achieving what he had always wanted in a shallow way that he was not satisfied with, he is forced to view the warpath he had left in pursuit of that goal. A broken home life, abused children, and nothing to show for it. His conversation with All Might in this arc gives him the push that he needs to finally start clearing up the broken path he had left in his wake. It's this new mindset that gives us our initial sighting of Endeavor trying to be a better father towards Shoto. If you ask the community at the time, this, however, received a very mixed reception. Some were skeptical of the level of nuance that would go into such a serious topic for a shonen manga, as an abuse storyline like this hits home for quite a lot of people. Others thought that Enji didn't deserve atonement to begin with, as his actions were pretty despicable. For myself personally, I don't think we should gatekeep people from trying to improve themselves, which isn't the same as forgiveness, of course. There will be plenty more to talk about for the Todoroki family shortly, though, and that will wrap up Remedial Course. The School Festival arc, or Culture Festival arc, whatever you want to call it, further builds on the idea I had spoken about previously of My Hero Academia starting to settle into where it wants to go for its endgame. This is also the point where you begin to see a strong divergence from the English-speaking and Japanese fandoms, with Japanese fans being quite fond of this arc and any student-related arc, but with English-speaking fans feeling like arcs like this are ultimately a waste of time and hoping to get more into the villain content. This is something that will be touched on in much more detail later. The anime adaptation for this arc was generally considered serviceable, and the concert scene at the time of writing is slowly approaching 100 million views, which is insane. In the spaces I occupy, this arc was often laughed off as filler or overall unneeded. To respond to that criticism, we first have to define what actually makes filler. Filler, by definition, is used for anime that shows us a story that was not originally present within the source material, often done because the anime's constant production cycle outpaces the manga, which was very frequent in the early days of anime. The School Festival is something that is clearly in the manga, so what is it about the arc that people don't like? Generally, when people are accusing something of being filler, it's not because they feel it needs the prior definition, but mostly because it bores them or doesn't contain elements that they like, and feel that if they skipped it, nothing would change. Basically, they deem this arc to be skippable and pretty pointless, or generally unneeded. In the context of the School Festival arc, is that true? Well, absolutely not. This arc is one of the most important arcs in the series in terms of narrative development, with great foreshadowing for the future with mentions of the thief Harima and villain Destro, showcases of Deku's growth not only ability-wise, as well as expanding our understanding of heroism. If you skip this arc and jump straight into Act 3, the series would make no sense. This arc shows the biggest milestone in Deku's skill growth so far, using Shoot Style and Air Force, two movesets he has developed himself to further separate him from the last generation, and using them in tandem to elevate himself to the next level. Deku is not only able to win, but he's able to win by himself and without destroying his body for the first time in this series. He begins to finally feel like he's making strides and reigning in the power of One for All, which has eluded him for so long. Also, to call back to an earlier point, his suit is evolving with him. These new support gloves are not only necessary for his development, even foreshadowing future events by having All Might say not to rely on support gear, but it adds a sort of completion of his color scheme, an added sense of cohesion to his already well put together character design. This act is colored by its attention to detail, and that's even shown in the way everything looks. I talked about this before in the Remedial Core section, but we're further shown that perhaps not everything can be solved with violence. Eri is a girl who had suffered tremendously due to the enemy's overhaul, and was saved by fairly conventional heroic means. Let's put saved in immense air quotes. However,
Yeah,
this School Festival arc acts as a
melee.
hammer in the lessons from Remedial Course, not only to the viewer, but also to Midoriya himself. We see it quite pertinently through Jiro that sometimes fighting is not your only option, as her hard work comes through in the form of an amazing concert that not only lets Eri smile for the first time, but also relieves some of the stress that the students of UA have been feeling since the villain attacks. School Festival also introduces two massively underrated villains, in Gentle and La Brava, mostly because it's hard to call them villains. Often thought to be a boring duo, these two villains are by no means evil. We are shown ordinary people and how they've suffered from aspects of modern hero society. Gentle Criminal in particular is an interesting foil for Midoriya, showing how just a bit of luck, or in Gentle's case, bad luck, can shape one's fate. They were both heavily affected by the idea of fame that is inherently tied to being a hero, but Gentle take it a step further. That is why when Gentle sees his old high school friend again, the words, "Who are you again?" cut so deep. It was true, it was hard to aim for fame, and now in his 20s, has been forgotten by even his schoolmates. It is this horrible feeling of being forgotten that pushes him to villainy. La Brava shows us a story similar to Toga, a society frowned upon quirk and a desire to express that quirk or individuality, her being bullied and shunned by her peers. The important part to keep in mind is, again, these two villains are not downright evil. Some people have the potential to be brought back, and and maybe the description of villain isn't suitable for some people. Throughout all of Act 1 and 2, our definition of villain is somebody who is doing pretty despicable and evil acts. Snape kills people who he doesn't see fit, Muscular kills for fun, but overall tortures a child, and Shigaraki wants to destroy it all. Meanwhile, Gentle and La Brava are making YouTube videos. In other words, these are the first two people that are not only pretty objectively normal people, as opposed to malicious and twisted, but these two are the first antagonists Deku can actually understand. Maybe villains can be empathized with too. This arc also demonstrates to us that the series is capable of handling trauma. Ochako is grappling with the fact that Nine died in her arms and she was powerless to stop it. Deku feels worthless because he once again had to rely on outside help to take down Overhaul, and Area is saddled with the immense baggage of the physical and mental abuse she had suffered in the Shie Saikai lair. We are shown that Horikoshi is aware that you can't just wake up one day and bounce back from everything that happened in the Overhaul arc. It delivers us a fun slice of life arc of the kids who had experienced something pretty traumatic, trying to enjoy themselves once again. This is a point that will be especially important for Act 3, so let's put a pin in that for now. Without this arc, we'd miss out on characterization for characters like Jiro and Eri. We'd miss out on moments that build your investment in the cast. We wouldn't have been introduced to new methods of heroism. We would have never gotten to see a new perspective on villains that influences the story later on. We wouldn't have seen this god-awful beauty pageant scene, and most importantly, our main character would not have progressed in any way at all. The School Festival arc is by no means filler or skippable. It is a shame that it's treated as more or less a joke by the online English-speaking fandom. During the School Festival's run of the manga, Season 3 of the anime also started premiering. I've already spoken about Season 3 in both of these videos, but I'll touch on it one last time. Season 3 has some of the most memorable moments of the entire anime adapted to an extremely high quality. Deku vs. Muscular and All Might vs. All for One are two of the best adapted moments. End of story. It was, however, dragged down by the aforementioned adaptation of the Provisional Hero License Exam arc, which wasn't really anything to write home about and had some absolutely mind-numbing anime original content, which was pretty new for the series. This was also arguably the absolute peak of the series in Western fandoms, whereas in the Japanese fandoms, there would still be plenty more room to grow. Charming character interactions, dynamic character starting points, and an easy-to-swallow therapy for the trauma these kids have had to face. But fine, maybe this isn't as action-packed as you would have wanted. In that case, this next arc should do you tons of favors. Pro Hero is quite a unique time for My Hero Academia. Remedial Course was almost like an arc designed to test the waters of having no focus on the main character, and Pro Hero is where we begin to see him seriously double down on that concept. Pro Hero is also when we see the fruits of Horikoshi's new editor's labor. The new editor is Ryosuke Yoritomi, who also had a say in the production of the first movie. It's hard to say just how much of an influence Monji might have had over the series, but his tenure saw the amazing first act, and now the torch was being passed to Yoritomi, who would remain editor until the very end of the second act. What we can see with Yoritomi's occupancy as editor of MHA is a massive, and I mean massive, expansion in scope for what the series covers. It's impossible to know just how much of this Yoritomi was responsible for, but all we can say for sure is that a lot of ground was covered while he was the editor. Pro Hero is the first of many risks we see this series take, as we get 9 chapters of focus on people who are not part of the main cast. That might not sound like a big deal, but Weekly Shonen Jump is a very MC-focused magazine. Decisions like this can spell the end. What makes Pro Hero even more crazy than that is how we shifted the focus from the main cast to an abusive being. It also convinced the audience to root for him. A better character to focus on, however, after the years of build-up on how flawed Hero Society really is, as we set our sights on a wife-beating child abuser who holds the most power in the nation. Endeavor is a terrible man who hopes it's not too late to turn back now, as the weight of the nation now rests on his shoulders post All Might retirement, as he burns away his past self symbolically and physically to accept the role for a woman. This portrayal, however, almost acted as a double-edged sword, especially after the anime's legendary adaptation of this arc. Endeavor became the center of years of online discourse, as not only did people feel he fairly didn't earn the right to be considered redeemed, but a much more nefarious aspect was creeping up. A subsection of weirdo abuse apologists who would defend everything Endeavor did, making excuses for the treatment of his family. Furthering this massive development on the flawed state of Hero Society, we also get the 2 figureheads representing society. We are officially introduced to the Hero Public Safety Commission, or HPSC for short, and of course, the number 2 winged hero, Hawks. Funnily enough, despite Hawks' massive success in terms of popularity, he was actually never thought of in the original outline for the series. It was a last-second addition to get the story moving in the direction Horikoshi wanted it to go. You can kind of tell, but this doesn't break immersion. As stories change, plans, and expand as they're written out more and more, as MHA was slowly expanding its scope, Hawks was yet another addition to that. A morally great hero in a sea of great heroic people. Teams up with yet another not-so-squeaky clean hero. Hawks speaks of making a society where heroes have too much time on their hands, and we get the idea of just how far he might Bakugo to make that dream a reality when we find out that he's acting as a double agent for the HPSC in the League of Villains. He is willing to do the things that nobody else wants to do in order to reach his ideal society, all the while feeling like a bird trapped in a cage due to the watchful eye of the HPSC. The Hawks of Dabi arrange for a high end to attack a big shot hero in order to prove Hawks' allegiance to the LOV, and it ends up being deployed on Endeavor, the now #1 hero. This fight serves as Endeavor's first opportunity to show the nation exactly what he will do as #1. Hood, a no-move valuing absolute strength above all, when to get stronger and stronger, and Endeavor. The pro hero fight is used to demonstrate quite explicitly the Endeavor of old, burned up and destroyed, as Enji quite literally kills the physical representation of the monster he used to be. Enji Todoroki, a person who obsessively chased the bed of All Might, which grew smaller and smaller, was never able to climb those mountains. He instead opted to breed an even better version of himself that could climb the mountaintops that he himself could not. This too, however, was quite the bumpy road and never quite led to where Enji had hoped. Instead, he did become the #1 hero, just not through the means that he had wished. This drove Enji mad, as it put into perspective just how meaningless everything he had done up to this point really was. As he pondered exactly how to follow up the symbol of peace, All Might told him that he doesn't really have to. The symbol was Toshinori's thing, and Endeavor needs to find what is his. What comes to mind is a flashing image of wanting to secure a future for his children and the next generation. The Pro Hero arc in a lot of ways is definitely a peak of the series, even with how small it is. My only gripe with this arc, and it's mostly in hindsight, is that this is where the series begins to waver on its themes of the next generation. As Endeavor becomes the one really spearheading the Todoroki family drama, and Shoto more or less takes a backseat in terms of pretty much everything for the foreseeable future. This fight also got some of the best animated sequences of the entire series. Seriously. This finale to Season 4 is legendary. It is one of the last bits of hype the series gets in anime form. We can talk much more about all this later, though. Besides all that, Pro Hero was fantastic. This will serve as our interlude, as this is also when the first MJ movie comes out. But I'm going to go ahead and hit off the 3 currently existing ones in this section, and maybe include any movies that come out in the third part of the retrospective. To put it bluntly, the movies are some of the most mediocre MJ content to ever be produced, at times being downright insulting to the source material. Two Heroes, the first of the 3 currently existing movies, released in 2018 based on an original story produced by Horikoshi himself. The movie was a pretty big success. It was actually released in the US first as a thank you to the overseas fans, grossing 14.1 million USD in Japan and 19.3 million USD in other territories, for a worldwide total of 33.4 million US dollars. The summary of the plot is that we get to see some All Might's past, and in the present, the kids and All Might go to a small island to hang out, I guess. Midoriya gets this new tech item called Full Gauntlet, which has some pretty daunting implications for his own consequences, and they fight a terrorist named Wolfram, until Midoriya and All Might beat him up. That's about all that mattered. Two Heroes is certainly the least egregious of the films, and to answer a question before it arises, yes, this movie and all the following movies are considered canon. That's why I'm going to make them a big deal. Despite how goofy it is that All Might and Midoriya going toe-to-toe with a terrorist with connections to All for One never being mentioned in the main story is, Full Gauntlet was pretty concerning when it first premiered as well. The biggest subplot for Midoriya at the time was the damage dealt to his arms and how he has to adjust to that revelation as he moves into becoming his own hero, but thankfully it was never brought to the main story. Heroes Rising, the second movie, released in 2019. Which revolves around an original ending that Horikoshi had planned for My Hero Academia and takes place after My Villain Academia in this timeline. This movie was actually the least successful one, despite having some of the craziest fan service imaginable, making 15.1 million in Japan and 13.5 million in US and Canada, totaling 28.7 million USD worldwide. The summary of this plot is that a lamer version of All for One, who has the copy of the AFO quirk, is let loose in an attempt to make a world ruled by those with strong quirks. They go to an island and beat the bad guy. Oh, and Midoriya gives Bakugo one for all. Yeah, that was Horikoshi's original ending. This would not be a problem if this were a non-canon film, but I will remind you, the movies are canon, and this was Horikoshi's original ending. The original ending, having a marginalized, discriminated child give away his one shot at making his goal a reality to his abuser, is absolutely fucking insane thematically. Midoriya working 9-hour shifts at a McDonald's register while Bakugo goes out and lives out his dream is, again, fucking insane. Not only that, but this also establishes a precedent of Midoriya doing this in fights. If the battle is tough enough, there's no reason for Midoriya to not hand out one for all like it's a virus so they can overcome any obstacle in their paths, just for the quirk to go back at the end of the fight anyway. The power going back through quirk magic is also insane. What would have been infinitely more pleasing and in character would be for Bakugo to wake up and refuse to use All Might's power to become the #1 hero, as he could do it on his own. Instead, we get this incredibly lame amnesia contrivance so that it doesn't rock the boat of the main series at all. Is the fight raw? Yeah. Does it look amazing? Oh yeah. Does it make any narrative sense whatsoever? God no, this movie is actually horrible for the continuity of MHA and stands below F tier for me. World Heroes Mission, the third movie released in 2021, and I believe revolves around an entirely original story created by Horikoshi. It takes place during the time skip of the Endeavor Agency arc, and it's actually the best performing MHA movie by far. It grossed almost 30 million in Japan and almost 20 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of nearly 50 million USD. The summary of this plot is that there is a doomsday cult known as Humorize that believes in the Court's singularity, and their goal is to commit global terrorist acts to kill every single Court user all at the same time. Our kids go around the world and disarm the bombs. They fight the bad guy, the end. While not being as narratively disgusting as Heroes Rising, this is still pretty bad. Our 16-year-old cast is now responsible for basically saving the world 3 times, and it's never mentioned in the main story at all, as if they share no continuity whatsoever. Yet they're frequently referred to as canon events. Rhodey is a cool movie original character, I guess. What's particularly awful about is what it means for Midoriya. He goes 100% on Fleck Turn, beats the ever-loving shit out of him, so hard he beats the poop out of him, destroys his limbs, and that's a wrap. Despite being told that he can only use his arms at 100% 2 or 3 more times, he suffers no consequences for what he does in this movie. World Heroes Mission did look really pretty though. I'll give him that. To summarize, the movies are really bad. Two Heroes is the best one because it does the least damage to the plot, but it's also the only movie I've ever almost fallen asleep watching. These are genuinely very bad films that you should not peep if you have the choice, unless you're looking for some dumb, meathead fun or very basic fan service content. If you've been also part of the Western fandom of My Hero Academia, you would have heard all about this arc. For those unaware, in at least English-speaking fandoms, Joint Training is one of the most controversial arcs of the entire series, for its relatively smaller stakes, slightly asinine pacing in both the manga and the anime, as well as being a turning point for Deku's development going forward. We also see a small but negligible dip in sales in Japan, however, that is likely due to the Joint Training volumes released shortly before Season 4's premiere. Coming fresh off the heels of Pro Hero, this arc suffered strong pushback due to the sudden and abrupt arc transition. Joint Training starts right in the middle of a chapter dealing with the fallout of the Todoroki family drama. Not only were manga readers not happy, but it was especially bad for the anime image, since Season 5 was heavily marketed around this arc, at a point where many fans in English-speaking communities were fed up with the long training arcs revolving around 1A and the like. While the series is called My Hero Academia, at least in some English-speaking circles, the student side of the story tends to be marked as the least interesting part of the narrative, and after an arc like Pro Hero, who could really blame someone for asserting that? The expectations set by manga readers who can't shut the fuck up led to high expectations for Season 5 for anime only, and it was going to have to do a lot to regain the love and hype MHA once had in many communities. This was also the season that made pretty clear that MHA coverage had slowly started to become less frequent on places like YouTube, Twitter, and so on and so forth. The controversial nature of this arc is founded on 2 factors. For one, JT is an arc that lacks pretty much any stakes for our characters besides some hastily introduced ones for Shoto, Shinso, and Tokoyami, as well as the intrigue as to what's going on with One for All. There is pretty much nothing going on here outside of that. There is nothing lost by either 1A or 1B losing to each other, as this is just a training match, and there is nothing gained because the new moves this arc showcases are moves the characters have or would have thought of otherwise. That's what I personally don't like about JT, but some people enjoy that low-stakes kind of environment, especially given that it's a
Where the heck is
logical
the
draw
chef
for Class A
going?
before the climax of Act 2. Secondly, we have what is perceived to be the massive expansion of One for All and Midoriya's power set. The introduction of the quirk Singularity and its manifestation within Midoriya allows One for All to become this sentient power, allowing them access to the other users' quirks. This was
Yo, Lana, what are you doing?
Concerns of the series' power creep were introduced, and concerns about Midoriya being able to use these newfound quirks as ass-pulls in tough situations also arose. There was also a large subsect of people who thought it was a random development and didn't make any sense. Not unlike how the misinformed viewed the Deku versus Muscular fight, saying Deku going 1,000,000% is somehow an ass-pull. The Vestiges playing a more active role is something that was actually pretty heavily foreshadowed back in Season 2 Sports Festival arc, where they intervened to break Deku from Shinso's brainwashing. Some people, myself included, also argued that the nature of quirk passing in a world where quirks assimilate into other quirks' cores, this was something more or less bound to happen, and also heavily predicted years in advance. Not only this, but from the jump, we learned that One for All is not only a quirk that passes on, but one that stockpiles. When was it ever said that the quirk stopped stockpiling after the first use? This quirk development started off highly controversial, and over time, manga readers became more comfortable with it, not only as time passed and their worries fell for naught, but also as Black Whip revealed itself to be an extremely interesting addition to Midoriya's kid. Despite it looking like a mold in the anime adaptation, Black Whip is seriously one of my favorite quirks in the series for how versatile it is. And even after unlocking all of the quirks at this point, Black Whip still remains a standout for how interesting it is for him and how much it opened the door for MJ's choreography, something we touched on in the first video as being largely uninteresting. Anime viewers took this quirk development much easier. It's also the quirk that receives the most thorough deconstruction out of all of them, but more on that in a bit. As mentioned before, Ochako didn't really get to do much in the internship arc. She mostly supported either from the front lines or completely off screen. This, along with how scattered her development is, has led people to, frankly, not really give a shit about her. While that's totally reasonable, Horikoshi's rotation-based pacing and wide-reaching focus in Act 2 has affected how people view her and even the rest of his class. He does rectify this in a smart way. From Choco doing nothing is something the story actually calls out. Her inability to say Meta or Midoriya pushes her thought process to become more broad and less about money or status. It's not just about wanting to support her parents financially, but that's about supporting others through being a hopeful and helpful presence. She basically has her hero moment, running without thinking to save her friend in danger, something she couldn't get herself to do during Overhaul. It's less of a change in ideals and more an expansion of one. This arc shows us a snippet of where Eri is at this point in the story as well. As stated before, that Eri and Deku share similar arcs. Learning that their destructive powers don't have to be such a burden on themselves, especially since that burden isn't really felt by anyone else. Matter of fact, both of their powers have only benefited other people. Deku's knife analogy pushes Eri's thinking in a very positive way, and also foreshadows how Izuku himself will be dealing with his powers. Without any doubt on how these two and MHA as a whole are building a unit of codependency, the joint training outright gives us that and promises way more. This is a very important setup, especially for the third act. Joint training's pacing is actually horrendous, by the way, above anime and manga, which is impressive. It moves at a snail's pace, and the manga has only 13-page chapters due to Horikoshi being sick and moving at the time. So you had a lot more time to be worried about the contents of this arc, as it always felt like we were going nowhere. It could have been done in 7 episodes, and the anime was instead made 12 to 13, which is insane. A lot of people say that this was not only a good decision, but also the most predictable and efficient decision made by MHA's production staff, but this can easily be debunked by the fact that the anime painstakingly adds content so that each match gets 2 episodes. Joint training did massive damage to the Western fandom, and the anime's shafting of My Villain Academia and reorganization destroyed it even further, as they put so much emphasis on JT as an arc and prioritized content with Class 1A and the kids rather than spending needed time on other arcs. I've already done a video on all of this, so check that out if you'd like. The arc isn't all bad. If you're here, the start of the multiple and Midoriya was really cool. The pain of him having finally grasped his power and being able to take out his first villain solo with no self-inflicted injuries leading straight into him having this outburst, making you feel like he's lost control once again. Joint training has quite a few cool character moments among AC and mid, and that is the best way that I can summarize it. As there isn't much else to say about it. Poorly paced, affected by the author's health and life situation, uninteresting events, lacking stakes, packed with cool character work. I guess let's just get to the part everyone has been waiting for. After an arc that was not entirely interesting, we get to probably the most important arc of the entire series. My Villain Academia managed to undo the damage done in the English-speaking fandoms by the joint training arc, but it doesn't mean that it was beloved everywhere. VA Image's villains in general have had a very tumultuous history. If we jump back to Act 1, do you remember the Forest Training Camp arc? The arc where all the villains interrupt the summer training and kidnap Bakugo. This arc was cut extremely short, but Horikoshi, after its poor performance in the reader surveys, the second the villains appeared. If you're wondering why this wasn't in part retrospective, well, that information just didn't exist yet. The easy takeaway from this is that the villains just don't do well in Japan due to cultural issues. The issue with this line of thinking arises when you ask a simple question: why? Why would that be the case? Are there literally no stories in Japan with likable or sympathetic villains? Of course not. There is in reality a much more simple and probable answer to this discrepancy. We have to stop viewing it as a West versus East problem. To get to the bottom of that, we need to understand just how Image is published. The simplified pipeline for a moment's creation is like so. The author creates the chapter, editor approves the chapter or asks for changes, and ultimately submits it. It's published in the magazine, and magazine readers will rank their 3 favorite stories that week in the reader survey. If the survey is looking bad for you, it's time to think about shaking things up. The possibility is that this is a problem for My Hero Academia, and this isn't speculation. I just want to emphasize that, is that the people who are deeply invested in the series and have to go online and talk about themes or dissect plotlines are not the people who are buying the magazines. They're usually buying volumes and reading online or purchasing official merchandise to support the series. The magazine is a much more casual way to experience the series, and by extension, every series in Weekly Shonen Jump. You crack it open, the heroes of the story doing cool shit, and put it down at the end of the day. When these dudes you aren't super familiar with and don't particularly care to spend the time analyzing their thematic relevance show up, begin to lose interest. My Villain Academia is a complete bucking of this idea. Horikoshi once stated in Volume 7 that he wouldn't make villain character profiles because he wanted to remain villainous and frightening, and shortly after experienced just how much the casual audience doesn't like the villains of the Forest Training Camp arc. This arc is a true testament to Horikoshi's evolution as a writer, and exactly the point where the massive maturation of the series begins. No matter how much his most important audience, magazine readers, does not vibe with the villains, he still decides to do one of the most ambitious things in Weekly Shonen Jump history. He uses this arc to display some absolutely gorgeous art that loses expression and character, while taking very clear inspiration from real-world art and religious subtext. He humanizes the Lego build by giving us payoff for all the endeavors, successes, and failures that have been through this arc, and using the humanization of these characters for some social commentary that we don't really see in most other arcs, all while executing this in such a unique way that Weekly Shonen Jump had never seen before, due to authors being very reluctant to shift the focus away from their main or most popular characters. And for Horikoshi to do this for half a real-life year was not only unprecedented, but very ambitious, and a very exciting premise that left a big impression on many fans. This arc cements the fact that the League of Villains are basically our second set of protagonists, following up on the parallel development we talked about earlier in this video. We don't exactly know how casual magazine readers felt, but we can definitely see a stagnation of sorts in the volume sales after Joint Training saw it show. Like I said earlier, this is the point where MHA grows up, in a sense. Thanks to the very ambitious nature of MVA, the series' potential would now skyrocket through a much-needed new layer of depth and complexity, as we now truly understood what made the LOV, but more importantly, our primary antagonist, tick, as well as learning things like the origin of quirks, or the importance of themes like nature versus nurture, or freedom within the story. The League also becomes an actual threat logistically after their loss of All for One, and it leads to the stakes of MHA never feeling higher, and that imminent sense of danger that many felt was lacking in MHA finally showed its face. This is all done under the protagonist's nose, by the way. Clearly, we are on the precipice of something huge, as MPA was the biggest turning point in the series' history. It was when we finally begin to see the untapped potential of the series' primary antagonist, Tomura Shigaraki, a villain who had been clowned in online spaces for years and years for being a whiny man-child, having absolutely nothing to his name. For years, Shigaraki, and by extension the League of Villains, were seen as incompetent or hard to take seriously as villains. Essential antagonists of the arc, the Meta Liberation Army, and the LOV's battle with them serves as a culmination of all their losses and improvements over the series, something we have been slowly building up to alongside the heroes. After the events of the USJ, Shigaraki learns to plan better and not act so boldly or immaturely, to not make such reckless decisions or lose his cool when faced with what was planned. This being combined with him learning to value his peers as equals and not just pawns, which is something the internship arc planted. In addition, the Stain arc taught him that he needs a proper doctrine or ideology if he wants to be a successful villain, or at least co-opt a successful ideology. The Forest Training Camp shows us the first steps of maturation of Shigaraki, where he considers his allies comrades rather than disposable pawns. This arc, and by extension Kamino, teaches him the importance of bonds, trust, and patience. NBA shows Shigaraki applying all of these lessons, and it's reflected in the familial bond the League of Villains has developed by the time we arrive at this arc. And his development stands out when he opts to use Redestro's resources after winning him over, since it perfectly highlights how far he's come since being seen as a lame-ass man-child. In addition to elaborating on Shigaraki as a character, it also furthers his parallels with Deku, where Midoriya experienced the inequality of life as being born a quirkless boy with nobody who supported his dream of being a hero. Shigaraki was born as a possibly late bloomer, or something else, but I won't speak on that. Born into a family who holds a disdain for heroes in general, despite his dream of being a hero. They also link up in that same regard. Insofar as the Shimura household hated heroes due to the hyperfixation on hero work, while Midoriya suffered from that same expectation placed on his shoulders in this modern society. The Shimura connection is important. Just how Shimura is the reason Tanko's victimhood warped into a murderous hatred, Nana is the reason why All Might's heroism turned into something that inspired Izuku. These similarities are not reinforced only thematically, but also visually with certain framing of some scenes. Finally, MHA gives up such an explicit answer as to where Midori and Shigaraki are headed, essentially being fated rivals. Up until this point, it felt like the endgame for our protagonist and antagonist character was not very clear, and 200 chapters in, MJ still felt like a piece of his puzzle was missing. With Shigaraki's backstory being inserted, we finally get that piece, and it becomes clear that Midoriya would have to be the one to step up and offer his hand to Tenko, an experience he craved all those years ago. This is shown where Shigaraki wonders if only someone had reached out to him. Toga is another character who benefited quite largely from this arc. We learned that her code led to a fairly poor upbringing for her, as she was rejected by not only society at large due to the nature of her power influencing who she is, but by her own parents, down on her due to the quirk she was born with. She was raised wearing a mask over her true self, as it's important to keep in mind the original translation of quirk, kosei, quite literally refers to one's individuality, a mask that slowly slipped off as she was forced to be somebody she isn't, as she was shoved into quirk counseling that didn't quite meet her needs, until one day it all boiled over and she acted on it. This makes her fight the League an even more impactful event, as she wanders through life looking for a place to belong, a place that would accept her for the way she is. And finally, she finds people that will accept her and allow her to be her true self. This is just a great development for the story's themes of discrimination, and how it affects someone with a quirk that can't help but result in less than favorable instincts and inclinations. No longer does she have to repress her truest self to please society, and she can finally live freely, as evidenced by her relationship with Twice. Twice is also a character who came out of MVA as a fan favorite. Not only did he massively benefit from stumbling upon the League, just like Toga did, finding a place to belong, but he finally finds out what makes him an individual. His character is almost the opposite of Toga's in that respect, as pointed out by Skeptic. With his parents deceased and his job lost, Twice had nobody to turn to but himself. There were no safety nets in place to catch somebody in usual freeform. After a while, however, Clarky cannot even trust himself due to his double quirk, and Twice's relation with Hux would become quite a overwhelming arc, as we see them both struggle with their own individuality. Twice, however, realizes that he is in fact himself. He knows he is not just a clone created by the original, and is finally able to let loose without fear. Horikoshi goes the extra mile by not letting his manic behavior go away once he hits a breakthrough in his trauma. These are still individuals with their own personality quirks and mental stability. That's a small detail that otherwise would have made their arcs feel too rushed. Oh, and speaking of Hawks, as far as we're aware, he literally killed Best Genius to get into good with the League of Villains. Let's keep that in mind for later. Last but not least, Spinner also finally gets some characterization in this arc. He steps up and figures out what he wants to do with himself. After months of stumbling around following the footsteps of Stain and Shigaraki, he accepts that his life will be one of Shigaraki's right-hand man, and subjects himself to his will. The arc also explores the League's ties to each other, interacting in their day-to-day, just so we get to see the heroes all the time. But to see this as our antagonistic force is something truly unique in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine. We get to see them at their absolute lowest and still stick together, just establishing a found family motif with our villain squad, especially heard in scenes of them down on their luck, contemplating how if they had simply gone with Overhaul's promises and they'd be wallowing in money and eating food like sushi right about now. The sushi talk, which is then remembered weeks later when Shigaraki epically uses the MLA money to treat his friends to a good meal. MVA shows us that these aren't two-dimensional comic book villains anymore. These are real people with flaws, connections, and backstories within the people they are today. Shigaraki in particular has a backstory that is so unbelievably impactful and informs many of the themes of the series we've become so familiar with, including just how much they both fed into the existences of our protagonist and antagonist. The antagonists of this arc, while ultimately underwhelming, still offer quite a lot to the series as a whole. The MLA introduces us to some core lore, like at least we refer to as meta abilities, and how core liberation limits the plot created while introducing our second coherent ideology to the series, even if it ends up half-baked at certain points. As a whole, they embody this mentality of self-liberation, where to live in a society that's free and enabling quirk use are sort of metahuman radicals in that way. Again, especially takes this ideology a step forward by saying those with stronger meta abilities should have even more freedom. In addition, Retro is far from the most complex or even best MHA antagonist, but still ends up a very likable and entertaining character whose motivations are understandable. Even the MLA is something many fans did not see coming and stuck with quite a few. How they're used to expand the arcs of the League should not go underappreciated. Zork, funnily enough, is also when the misogyny allegations started ramping up big time, as Curious was literally the only character to die throughout the entire sequence, and some saw this as a very strange trend for My Hero Academia going forward of heavily maiming or killing female characters. How you feel about this is up to you, but it's definitely noticeable. There were also weird assumptions made about Twice and Toku's relationship, but we don't need to get into that. The Equals defeat the Metal Liberation Army and officially combine into the Paranormal Liberation Army. We see trends of Japanese kegare, or defilement in people like Toku, feel like a direct reference to the Burakumin people of Japan, and these organization names feel almost directly inspired by the Burakumin Liberation League. Possible some inspiration was taken from these real-life events and concepts. While I obviously can't go super in-depth here to keep true to the retrospective's chronological order, it's clear that this arc is loved and very important for a reason. It's considered by many, myself included, to be the best story arc of My Hero Academia. This arc did so much work for the series that from now on, it will be quite a popular take to say that the villains carry the series, which makes it all the more frustrating about how dogshit the anime adaptation for NBA was, and instead focused on the most controversial arc of the story, and NBA's anime adaptation marked a major shift for MHA's reputation as a whole, which we can further get into in the Act 3 video. I've already mentioned my lengthy video about everything wrong with Season 5 and NBA's adaptation, and to summarize it further, NBA's adaptation has some of the least consistent character arc and animation the series has ever seen, with absolutely nothing strong coming out of it, as well as having its entire outcome spoiled with twists and turns burned out by an arc switch, putting Endeavor Agency before NPA in the anime. It was an absolutely nonsensical choice which completely and utterly killed hype for the MJ anime and online spaces, and Season 5 was also one of the lowest viewed ever in Japan. The adaptation for this arc was nothing but a complete disservice to this absolute behemoth of an arc, as evidenced by just how much time I was able to spend talking about it. Finally, on to the penultimate arc of Act 2. Finally, we get to the second to last arc of My Hero Academia's second act, the Endeavor Agency, the short-lived calm before the storm in a sense, as we rapidly barrel towards our climax. With the events of NBA and Deku City fresh in our minds, we understand this underlying sense of dread that underlies our trio training together under tutelage. Endeavor Agency began two primary things 7 years back. Number one, it began an unbelievable stretch of MHA, which will probably be looked back at as the golden age of the series, with the villain arc, the Endeavor Agency arc, and the upcoming arc at unprecedented times of greatness. It began a period of time where it was quite apparent that Midoriya had taken a backseat in his own story. Even on rereads, it still feels like a chunk of time that was missing. But on a weekly basis, it was definitely something to be away from our MC for so long, as people were desperately hoping for some more characterization for our protagonist. While Endeavor Agency does have some Deku shine since he is the MC, mainly focuses on the Twitter of the thing, as implied by the name, which becomes quite a massive subplot for the series for better or for worse. Obviously, this will culminate in excitement, for we would get back to that eventual Deku performance. But for now, it's been more than made aware that Horikoshi is simply focusing on world building and his other
Oh,
characters.
damn.
When I talk about the greatness of the Endeavor Agency, I would like to touch on some things I felt like they came up short or were lacking. Common complaint of the Endeavor Agency is that, well, the agency part of its arc was more or less strict. We still get to see the trio train together all the time, and hero work together, and we learn the ins and outs of professional heroism. It's being terribly apparent by a time skip that skips over everything of potential interest. This hurts a bit more given how this is an arc centered around the origin trio, the three most popular characters in the entire series. And while their dynamic leaves things to be desired, this would have been fun to see how they and their quirks bounce off of each other, especially while working under Endeavor. The anime compounds this problem, doing absolutely nothing creative with the adaptation of its arc, even though it tries by including some interesting anime original scenes and a couple of gorgeous OVAs. An episode about Ochako stopping 9/11? And it's one that would be taking place during the time skip. I'm sorry, but the anime adaptation for this arc is, to put it lightly, absolutely dreadful. Since it was placed before NBA, this is what we get much obliterated. And that's he had seemed like it should have been training to end this website for training absolutely destroyed the MJ and the reputation of people on this basis. The adaptation is an extremely boring screenshot gallery with global flashbacks to Noah's pacing. Episode even adapting a singular chapter. That episode needs some padding to get more time on its epic shared in the family drama itself. Not to mention the dog shit filler episode before it to come up with their movie. The saving grace was time with the street fight with the trio versus Eddie. Fiction with strangers and castle. Anything that was Todoroki family focused on this argument was kind of hastily thrown together. It's just Midoriya's mastery of Black Whip, and kind of locked only in the limited will and exalt himself. He would not use his power until he had mastered one for all. Suddenly, this was a sort of expectation for this power with his power I don't know if I personally subscribe to this complaint, but it is also something to be said about just how many people are not interested in the triad's dynamics. Some people prefer linear trios with the likes of Midoriya, Uraraka, and Nika, and found the origin trios to be massively lacking when it comes to how they interact with each other. Our response to this is that is just the nature of realism. It's a job, and they're not always going to be working with two your best friends with those who suit you and your skills more. A concession can be made that the trio is made up of better and more fun duos, a highlight being the new Bakugo and Shoto dynamic built up from their one-sided rivalry at the sports festival. Well, for me personally, there isn't really a problem with giving this trio some spotlight. Now, of course, I must say, just like it's some parties and some Endeavor, someone who has done genuinely terrible things, attempts to better himself and seeing the reactions of that to the entire family. A genuinely amazing portrayal of families we see from me and our desperately moving family makes a little bit. See, that's what we say the same as a music bastard. We can never remove Endeavor had done Toy and Shoto from his mind. But again, Shoto, someone torn down despite his father for what happened to his mother and of course even himself. When a boy sees his father trying to do the right thing, what about Endeavor Agency is that it never tries to portray any as the outlet to give to all the children in the household and understand how they get rap. Something else that sets this arc apart is how Horikoshi isn't trying to nauseatingly force us to think Endeavor is good and should be forgiven actually. What he instead does is separate forgiveness and atonement. Family doesn't have to forgive him. Endeavor doesn't even necessarily want forgiveness. He simply wants to do what is right. Should be doing for its family. This becomes abundantly clear when by the end of this arc, I was to remove himself from the family's home so that they can live their day-to-day without him. This distinction between forgiveness and atonement is what forms the stepping stones for this plotline success. It leads to even more introspection down the line pertaining to introspection from Endeavor. Fair to not mention Hawks in this equation either. While having a really small role, his presence as an informative double agent not only adds the tension building into the next arc, not only allows the audience to get a peek at how the villains are doing during this time, like literally see Shigaki really body capable of all for one, but also enables an ongoing motif in his involvement with the total fan drama. The next two arcs explore that involvement further, with him being willing to communicate with inside information to Endeavor first, and Endeavor almost immediately understanding what Hawks is trying to say implicitly, led to get to a building of their dynamic. Plus, it's always just a treat to see Hawks. In short, people who think MJ fell off after NBA sound ridiculous. This arc not only furthers the threads left from My Hero Academia as well as the tension, it also serves to use several different plotlines, like Midoriya's own personal training, Todoroki family drama, and a little bit of Bakugo. While myself and many others wish this arc could have done more with its premise, it was still a very solid arc overall, and it helped contribute to MJ's golden age. Up to the final arc of Act 2, serves as this Act's cameo, an arc that completely and utterly shakes the world and the status quo of the story. Speaking personally, this was the most hype-paid weekly experience it's ever been for me. Every single chapter was incredibly interesting and driven with the utmost rawness and swag. Seeing the culmination of over 250 chapters of slow build-up explode into the absolute chaos that was the PLW arc was an amazing experience. One that actually at one point out-trended the American 2020 presidential election. While it definitely fell on its faces, it also did great in sales. It didn't push the numbers, but it seemed to maintain a consistent sales count that made us think that perhaps the series had just evened out at a pretty solid amount. We don't know how the anime adaptation for this arc has gone, as at the time of uploading, it literally just started. But we will definitely circle back to it in the Act 3 video. Ironically, this arc is now started off too well. They open up on the Kurogiri interrogation, which most would consider the series' biggest fumble at the time. This is because all of the investment and build to this reveal was actually shoved into the canon spin-off by Your Academia, which I think is painfully boring besides this stuff right here. So if the only thing you consume is the main story, a large part of Aizawa's characterization, which makes him a much better and more relatable character, as well as gives context, which makes sense of Kurogiri and any possible investment in the Shirakumo guy, lacking. Regardless of this, however, reveal that Kurogiri is actually Aizawa's old friend is good set dressing to set up the storm that has finally arrived. This moment helps humanize Aizawa and sets us up to want to see the Doctor go even this fall. However, that's just a rough patch. The series not having well-defined stakes is a common criticism. So stakes are something people who watch MHA always thought was lacking because there was no arc like this for arc. So when we watch a major character actually die, another get permanently injured, Shigaraki decaying an entire mountainside, and Gugazamaki's rampage, it's easy to understand why this arc was such a satisfying hype experience for most. MHA is a story that progressively gets darker and darker, and shows a more realistic side of what a superhero society would look like over the course of the series, starting from the Before Hero School and winding up here. Battlefield filled with casualties and showed the realistic consequences of a heated, large-scale collision like this, and people expected this to be a massive wake-up call for heroes, hero students, and civilians alike. The first major event of the arc is Hawks vs. Twice and Dabi, an incredibly emotional and deeply thematic encounter. A prominent theme for MHA's villains is how your life can completely shift for the worse via one bad day, and this battle perfectly encapsulates that by pitting three fan favorites against each other, despite sharing a great amount of similarities. Not only does this fight manage to deliver arguably poignant narrative in a fight within the story, so while setting the bar for the war stakes incredibly high by having the series kill its first major character, Fuck You Night Eye, having Hawks' wings reduced to ash. The Hawks and Twice dynamic is one that has been moving in the background for months now. We see Hawks fight someone he understands. For the first time probably in years, Hawks slows down to help someone who's shackled by their lack of freedom, just like he is. And it's through that lack of freedom that Hawks gives Twice the finishing blow. Hawks being shrouded by darkness, trying to lift Twice out of that darkness is ironic, given how Twice is depicted as being a light in the scene. This is where Hawks' morally predictable life comes to a head. A decision that someone born of uncorrupted altruism would never succumb to. Unfortunately, Hawks' heroic nature has been morphed into something that is rendering him as the darkness. This fight has caused arguments to this day, as people feel that Hawks was in the right to kill Twice, and that Twice deserved a second shot. A bird trapped in a cage versus a man trapped in the cycle of villainy. Truly the most compelling battle of My Hero Academia. Moving on, Shigaraki waking up after the heroes raid the hospital has got to be one of the greatest chapters in the entire series. Shigaraki awakens into the vestigial dream world, surrounded by not just crumbling homes, but a crumbling society. His one true desire to destroy it all, personified. Hands look at the scene, decaying from the wrist up. You can also notice that a vast majority of the hands in the scene are pointing in his direction. In the decay, mentioned this in another video, check that out too. Hands are meant to represent connection. It's as if the decay hands represent Shigaraki feeling no one will reach him, the same way he felt on the day of his taking in by AFO and his grooming into the monster he has become. Shigaraki, who's supposed to be deemed his family unnecessary in My Villain Academia, but this is for a moment here. We see him confront his family and treat them quite normally. It's as if he's coming to terms with the last bit of familial connection remaining. AFO then appears and demands he come to him now, but his family grabs him and stops him in his place, making pleading with him not to forget. His family wants to stop him from marching forward towards the devil, but Shigaraki sees it as rejecting who he is, so he destroys that last bit of connection that made life older within himself, and marches towards a cross-like figure. To the Shimura family and the reader, all for one is more like the devil. Shigaraki, all for one, is the one who reaches his hand out and saves him on that one bad day. He finally wakes up, or more accurately, comes back to life, destroys everything in his vicinity. Shigaraki, in a sense, gets an I am here moment to starkly contrast with Midoriya and All Might. He rises from the rubble in all his angelic glory and proceeds to wreak absolute havoc on Japan. Shigaraki's speech about the dichotomy between heroes and villains is so poignant, because while we're aware of what he's saying, hearing Shigaraki say this aloud, essentially declaring that he's truly coming to his own as a villain, is so satisfying and sends chills down the spines of everyone. We also see that the lingering vestige of All for One clings onto Shigaraki's subconscious, but he completely rejects the demon lord, saying he wants to be better than him. His body is his own, effectively separating himself AFO and becoming his own symbol of terror. Hidden mirroring the sense of death that AFO gave off in Kamino is another point of satisfaction and leads to yet another riveting battle where we see a desperate attempt for the heroes to just survive. The Shigaraki battle is an amazing example of not only the stakes increasing, but of just how incredible of a weekly raid this was, as we get to watch Aizawa get permanently injured and cut off his own leg in the rawest way possible. This coupled with a backsplash of his students and droppings of airy pails makes plot points like the Shirakumo stuff has made him sort of a protected parent, make the build-up worth it. In addition, we see Gran Torino getting punched in his gut, which yes is a good moment, and Endeavor fighting for his life against the Shigaraki who's fucking made him. The climax of Bakugo's character arc, where his mindset finally shapes into something that instinctively considers someone else, aka his long-awaited hero moment, and in between all of this, we cut back and forth between against Bakugo's rampage, which shows us a jaw-dropping scale of destruction, something that has never been seen before in My Hero Academia. This was shaping up to be something that a post-apocalyptic version of Japan. Watching the students struggle and try not to break out of the pressure of Makia's rampage as their development and training is put to the test is awesome, and all of the possibilities for these characters following the battle was super exciting, like the Kirishima and Mina scenes, or Momo finally stepping up and taking plan from her now deceased mentor Midnight. Another loss for the hero side that can have a deep effect on our student. Midoriya, in a rage seeing Aizawa pass out and Grand Rito at death's door, activates his next quirk, Float, against Shigaraki, effectively turning it into a 1v1. Float is an example of an unfortunate shift in Horikoshi storytelling, as he gets into the groove of hype first, explanation later writing, a moment which could have easily worked if it happened in real time, instead of time skipping 2 months. Showing him and Ochako actually interacting and training together for once, along with some of the other kids, while also giving insight into Bakugo's character and his past in Blood for All as a whole. While the float reveal was lacking, I can forgive it because what it led to is one of the greatest fights I've read weekly. Midoriya's self-sacrificial nature is finally explored instead of just being poked at, as he decides to destroy himself in order to take down All for One right here, right now. His self-worth also comes into question, as he doesn't see himself as Midoriya Izuku, but he sees himself instead as a vessel for One for All, designated purely this moment of destroying Shigaraki and All for One. He effectively dehumanizes himself to justify the situation he's in, and the narrative quite literally gives us a reminder of the state of Midoriya's arms according to his doctor. This served as a fantastic way of executing and ramping up the idea that Deku has a lot of underlying issues that obviously aren't addressed in a manner it deserves in the middle of a battle for the entire nation. This is especially pertinent to keep in mind as Midoriya had been more or less on the back burner as a character since the School Festival arc, an arc that ended 2 years prior. So it was extremely cathartic to see. This also leads us to yet another P chapter for PLW, as Bakugo is just as aware as the viewer that what Midoriya is doing is not good. Bakugo, who had been pushed in the background, which makes sense as he was learning not to be the star of the show, cooks up a plan to finish the fight out quickly and save Midoriya. This is his biggest moment since provisional license, as he flies Endeavor out to try and kill Shigaraki, but unfortunately it doesn't work due to Shiki relinquishing control to All for One. Shiki, for one, sends spikes towards Midoriya, and Bakugo takes the hit for him before his body can think. While this moment is amazing for Bakugo, Shiki, for one, remarks how pointless it was, which is true. That Bakugo is the main character, the strongest, nor even the smartest. The hero moment, aside from the meta context, meant nothing. It is purely important on a personal and emotional level for Bakugo's character and Midoriya, who has to witness it. This event, or Chapter 285, was officially the last chapter that editor Tomi was replaced with a brand new editor to help close out MHA. Taguchi, as mentioned previously, Tomi is someone who might have helped Horikoshi massively expand the scope of My Hero Academia for better or for worse, so his potential work at least helped us get some amazing arcs. And now, he has been replaced with Taguchi, someone famously known for being the Grim Reaper of Weekly Shonen Jump. Whether that reputation is based on truth or not is hard to say, as it's very hard to determine just how much an editor is responsible for. All that can be said, sure, is that Taguchi was the editor for many canceled series. Even with that in mind, maybe he will prove to be more of a help than a hindrance. Moving on, Shigaraki grabs Midoriya and attempts to take One for All, but instead gets taken to the message realm, which revealed that due to Shigaraki's time in the tank being too short, he needs to finish finalizing his body before he can successfully take One for All. During this altercation, all for One is slowly summoning Itobura, Midoriya instinctively rushes to aid Shigaraki. On a week-to-week, this was definitely some out-of-the-box behavior for even Izuku, but as we'll see, it will lead towards his biggest development yet. After this, we cut to Ochako versus Toga, a conflict that will for, believe it or not, the entire act. Ochako, who has been battling with the notion of being a hero who saves other heroes since Overhaul, finally comes to grapple with saving someone who isn't a hero, but a villain, which comes after her inability to empathize with Toga for where she was coming from. Toga feels like she gets the answer to the question she asked PLE about just how far some heroes will go to save someone. It's a shame that this fight was squeezed between Deku versus Shigaraki and the Bakio moments, because it was great for both their characters, but unfortunately got a bit overshadowed. Hell, people were saying PLW was too slow at this point. Do you remember back in the Act 1? I said that a theory spawned about the missing Todoroki sibling. This is the first major theory to ever get confirmed in the absolutely amazing Chapter 290. This reveal was so hype, it quite literally outtrended the ongoing US 2020 presidential election at the time. Still maintains a spot as one of the best chapters of the series. A plot twist everyone saw coming, but was some of the best execution in the history of My Hero Academia. A plot twist does not necessarily have to be something hidden from the viewer, or something inherently shocking. It can in fact feel quite rewarding as a reader to put the pieces together, and instead of having a writer arbitrarily change directions because it got predicted, instead reward their investment by confirming their suspicions. Endeavor, at the absolute peak of his atonement arc, gets torn the fuck down by the slug yet abandoned. We've gotten a couple of bits and pieces informing us that something terrible had happened to Toya, but now we're no longer left to fill in the blanks. Toya laughs at Endeavor's attempt to look forward to the future and tells him past never dies. Toya cleverly uses his story and broadcasts it to the entire world, pinning the killings of Dabi on Endeavor's flames, and manipulating the sequence of events in Hawk's killing twice to absolutely shake Hero Society to its core. Chapter 290, however, is the last hurrah of MHA as we know it. Starting from here on out, whether it be a stylistic change from Ori or the influence of the new editor Taguchi, we are now on a completely different course pacing-wise, as we get a string of some pretty weak to even bad chapters that negate proper build-up for cliffhangers, an unfortunate sign of things to come. Best Genius returns and stops Dabi, Moving the weight in moral greatness of Hawks' actions, which undermines Hawks' character if his questionable actions are just undone. We get the long-awaited Miriam return, which is actually awful. Miriam and by extension Aries' plotlines are absolutely blown apart for the sake of a hype cliffhanger and are rapidly concluded in a flashback page 2. We finally get Bakugo's hero name, which isn't egregious in itself, but feels weak sandwiched wrong through the reveals, despite the genuinely funny reactions we get from it. We then get another reveal when Conference reveals his origins as being related to the legendary thief Oji Haruma, which, who fucking cares? We get Deku unlocking a quirk we've never heard about before, altering the way in which we grow with Deku during his quirk application. And finally, battle ends as Mr. Compress is taken in, and Offer One fully takes hold of Shigaraki's body, and they retreat. As Deku tells Shigaraki that he needed saving. We get the aftermath chapters, which are, for the most part, actually pretty good, which shows us the wide-scale destruction of Japan. We get to see Ochako and some frogs saving people from collapsing buildings, and Ochako first-hand seeing heroes find out that they are not suited for this job as they hang up their capes for good. As stated before, we also get confirmation of Midnight's death, important supporting cast member for many of the kids' arc. I'm sure this will lead to some interesting introspection in the future, especially for someone like Momo, who learned a lot from her, and Mina, who has now gone through her first significant emotional breakdown. Breaking away from her stereotypical preppy nature, we then get the highly anticipated prison breakout arc, except it's not an arc, and it happens in 18 pages. That sucks, but I suppose it's pretty straightforward content anyway. All for one is free, and so are many of the villains Midori has come to encounter. Fish, muscular, and overhaul. What this can be for a future arc is promising to say the least. Radesho's twice calling before Twice's death destroys the Hero Public Safety Commission HQ and kills the at the time president of the HPSC. This coupled with the loss of Hawks' wings are making some fans question if Hawks was now truly free for both the court that forced him into a life of espionage and also from the organization that took him in and trained literal child soldiers. We get an answer to this almost immediately. Hawks gets his own backstory, coming from a dirt poor abusive household, so poor in fact, heroes attempts to operate there. We simply thought they were fictional characters. His backstory basically cements his involvement with the Toto family. While Dabi was destroyed by the abusive father that was edgy, Hawks finds hope in the hero that is Endeavor. This all happens because all-night figures were simply too expensive to buy for the book guy. Endeavor is literally the poor man's version of All Might, and it's just cruel Rikoshi to so begin yet another claim feel that Hawks' wings are going back. Okay. Currently, Hero Society is in absolute shambles, and all of the blame is being placed on Endeavor's shoulders, while he also has to grapple with the fact that Dabi is his long-lost son. We see that while purchasing women to breed children with them is extremely odd, to put it lightly. Endeavor wasn't necessarily a bad character, so Toya was not the perfect child he had envisioned. He still wanted to help fuel the flames of the mission within the after sustained more and more injuries in his course guyblash, however, Endeavor refused to stop. The problem was, this was all Toya had. It was the only way that he could seek approval from his father, and his dream in ways of paternal approval. Now been stripped from it as Endeavor attempted to reproduce a replacement for Toya. Q shows no being born. Toya, who ended up resenting his replacement, kept training in secret in order to impress his father, but it only brought out the worst in Endeavor, who kept spiraling down as All Might's back and preparing to her away until Toya incinerated himself on Sakoto Peak, because all he knew how to do was turn up the heat. In the midst of reflecting on all of this, Shoto says to himself that he will have to be the one who handles Toya, until 5 seconds later, when his mom comes back and says, okay, never mind, we'll handle it together now. So we get the unfortunate news. One for All is now a known name, and Hawk's supposed to know more about it, but All Might says he will tell him everything. Q chapters 304 and 305, some of the best Midoriya character work of the entire series. Phenomenal chapters. We learn that Midoriya has unlocked the danger sense, the 14th court. Died to old age. In fact, it wasn't because of the danger sight from Hero Break. All it was as if One for All was sapping away their power source. The reason the court is acting in this way is because these users aren't quirkless. This is a big reveal for the series. We learn that Midoriya might be the very last wielder of One for All due to the ever-decreasing population of quirkless people. And having OFA alongside another court basically kills you. We also learn this is basically Horikoshi's fuck you to anyone who thought that being weak or quirkless made you the wrong choice for him. See, literally every other choice would have died. But more depressingly, that means the responsibility of ending All for One falls only on the Midoriya's shoulders. No more generational gaps. It has to end here. That is when Nana Shimura asks the important question, can you kill Tomura Shigaraki? Here's Midoriya telling him that he wants to save him with the backdrop of a decimated Japan, something highly criticized, but to be quite honest, it's extremely fitting for Midoriya's character thus far, including defines the third act of My Hero Academia. He grapples with the concept himself, just his fist, unsure if what he wants to do is the right thing. When understanding Tomura Shigaraki helps save that crying little boy inside of him, or what is still lead to him having to kill him, he acknowledges the burden that Shigaraki has caused, lives he has taken, the people close to him that he has hurt, and Deku doesn't forgive him. We see exactly how he feels about Shigaraki in the war. He will never forgive him, and he had certainly tried to kill him prior. What makes this so great is how nuanced it allows Deku to feel. He still feels the hurt and the anger that Shigaraki had caused him and doesn't forgive him, but still, no. He comes to the conclusion that One for All has the power to save, not kill. He doesn't know if it'll work, or if it's the best path to take, but we get to see exactly what's going on in Midoriya's mind. He wants to save that little boy, or at least try to. While most of the predecessors consider this the right answer, it seems the second and third users of One for All do not approve of this mindset. In the final chapter of Act 2, Hawks and Endeavor get grilled on the medium for the things that have been revealed about about them. Questioning a toxin the gravity of him killing twice feels absolute lackluster, but Endeavor resolves that he will shoulder the blame for everything, telling the critics to direct their criticisms and doubts onto him, not at the people who will be putting their lives on the line. Just like in the Procure arc, he tells the crowd to watch him. As if this moment wasn't powerful enough, we then find out Midoriya had left notes to all of his classmates spilling the beans about everything. When we see a beaten down, tired Midoriya standing on a tower watching a giant villain attack, paralleling him in Chapter 1, as we find out that he had dropped out of UA. End of Act 2. Act 2 had ended on an absolute high note, one of the most hyped reveals ever, and the note that we are now in the endgame of My Hero Academia. The reveal that this was the end was met with many, many mixed opinions. Some people felt that this was far too early and MHA still had much to explore. Others responded with that Act 2 was 4 entire years long, so Act 3 could be just as long, and others could decide what an act actually was. Some of was one that after Kamino, hype was at an all-time high, but now, even though the anime was giving a pretty shameful display, these kind of amazing chapters to look forward to. We were about to enter a new era of My Hero Academia. It was society absolutely crumbling, trusted heroes eroding, Shigaraki slowly being perfected, all from what Tiki told, and Victoria out of UA, it's going to only go from here. Thank you so much for watching. The video was non-stop work. If you'd like to, like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see videos similar to this one, you can also check the description down below for all of the social media of every single person who helped me through this, everyone who worked in the scripts and so on and so forth. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I'm objective
What?
times, and you can join my Discord down below, where we talk about My Hero
I can craft air.
and stuff like that. Thank you so much for watching. See you.
Fuck it, I'll rewatch Act 3's retrospective as well.
September 7th, and the MHA fans were already beaten down and trodden after the beats of season 1. Not only has some of the series' best content been absolutely butchered by the adaptation, but one of the worst arcs in the series had gotten the greatest adaptation. Tensions were high, fandom was infighting, as more and more people defected to become haters. Things were not all good, as the manga had finally ended its third and final act, and the content we were getting was looking great, until that fatal day. Joel Block's accusations of switching up, and general approval took place, as the biggest upheaval in the fandom's history. On one side, other people act as if they were unsure just able, refusing to acknowledge or accept any and all criticism of the story, and that people who said these things were simply due to not. On the other hand, there were people that did work that with the nature of the comic, but they call everybody mildly praised the series and take note. There existed a middle ground that legitimately way or criticize the series. However, due to sheer polarization at the time, most suffered on the way. However, it wasn't always like this. That unlike the activity on my spaces, started off with immense hype and then just featured some of the series' strongest chapters to date. Fox vs. Twice, Deku vs. Shigaraki the Doctor, with backstory, Chapter 305, and of course, Chapter 306, which ended Act 2. Season 5 was, to put it bluntly, shit show, but people still had longer chapters to look forward to. As Act 3 progressed, however, the tide quickly changed. A series that ultimately relied on the potential of this is a great setup after to see how it's executed later. Now, finally, when the timer has come, MHA spent much of Act 1 to do the setup. Act 3 ended with the execution. The games about executing the massive scope of the series in just one act. But Act 2 was super long, so probably 5. Right? As people perceived that chapter quality got worse and worse, the polarization of the fandom only grew. However, really grew inside that toxic positivity. Oh, not a bad thing at all to enjoy the story or not enjoy it at all. But people were genuine, one of their way too harassed and attack criticism. Many people out of the queue were continually following them around to make fun of their takes. It was genuine, just weirdo behavior. As people would base their entire personality off of a manga, you could have made a personal attack who said something. On top of all that, Morikochi's help in the fun construction series was clearly defined. A sad is that most of the other more documented comics or JJ, around this same time, a lot of war groups or prepared for the final act. Her war coach refused to try to take what was not known. Also, let me contribute that he won't be serious. Just like that, you never share nuts. For negotiating by extension, all of the show jump for conflict, that make the production cycle, this is interest. Well, gosh, others, right? It's sad reality, however, is used as an example to get better series. State that I'm working on the chain direction of the coaches on the 10th. Check the leverage in some ways to try to but stop talking. And for now, let's talk about where it all went wrong. The origin that changed the perception of life here ever. You're somebody who's very notable for the backlash to their thoughts on like that part. Like, you want to tell us about that experience?
In one word, disappointing. I guess. Since I have been making content for my hero academia for half a decade. You know, half the time over, half the time about it. If we had had a situation where people dislike my content, people would take
I have no idea what to do with this room.
That's how it works. You have to judge stories on the sense of elements and expectations. Some people just have different sort of expectations or are more keen to the story than others. But himself, the Your Academia had set expectations for itself that it failed to live up to. Going to this arc about started for the type of content, as he hadn't had a father or his own stories since the Culture Festival, which is sure, which he sees as feeling a lot on a page of the weekend theaters. That was for the entire years. Martin came on the heels of it. It's a repeat of My Hero Academia, or the golden treatment of My Hero Academia and never agency in the criminal Christian world. The Church of Marx set up a real time for a huge fall from grace, a point where he devalued himself to the point of calling himself holy as power, devaluing himself to a point where he will destroy himself to achieve his power's goal. An arc in the making for 3 years, however, failed tremendously to deliver on its primary function. Chapter 3 305 was an example of how incredible it is that whose thoughts about this radical ideas of My Hero Academia opts to more or less not deliver on the very premise this arc was founded upon, which is exploring Midoriya. After 300 chapters, expect the entire arc surrounding Deku and his self-sacrificial nature, cover how he ended up this way, or delve deeper into Midoriya's psyche to further unravel his self-destructive state, but it completely fails in providing Deku's point of view and really only let him be at his lowest point for like 5 seconds before the kids got to be shoehorned back in. POV merchants by the positive side of the fandom, and yes, I would like it if the series delivered on its main character, my man. This kind of summarizes the arc in since it promises so much but delivers on all of that in a depressingly limited fashion. Instead of deep introspection on how Midoriya wound up here, this is maybe one step forward before being saved by his friends, but that day both of Deku accepted and felt unearned and glossed over. Chapter 317 is a perfect example of this. It's a chapter that people considered one of the best in the entire series, hype at an all-time high as Deku dramatically dismisses All Might and chooses to go on a path alone with any of the help. He is shown struggling, fighting a bunch of villains for like 1 plague second. Kids are there to save him, and then Deku says,
This
sorry
place
to
is
All
way
Might,
too
but
big.
also everything that
I
happened was
overestimated how big I
Villain
needed
Merchants,
this
a
place
small
to
version of
be.
the arc Horikoshi wanted to make, it doesn't really end there. This can be felt primarily through the pacing of the arc. If you don't know what I mean by pacing, the speed at which a story is told. Pacing is determined by the length of events, how fast the action moves, how quickly the
Could be it.
info, and so on and so forth. The war arc and the end of it. As if you were in a car with Horikoshi and he dropped a cinder block on the gas pedal, and he doesn't let go for like, oh man, I wonder how Midoriya's arms go. Oh, there it is. Oh jeez. I can't wait to see how Midoriya wins over the second and third use the one for all. And it's over. Alright, well, I guess he didn't have to convince them at all. Crap, they're going to the evil villain layer. Oh, it's like now, and everything happened off screen. Wow, Midoriya's at his lowest moment and just abandoned All Might. Well, I blinked, and the class is here to save him, and everything's better now. Never mind. The absolutely insane pacing of the series in this arc can also be felt through Midoriya's corpse. Deku spent 4 seasons getting a grasp on 20% of his power. And of course, we couldn't necessarily continue with that stealth pace, but at the end of Season 5, Ray goes from 20% in Black Whip to how he is at the end of Season 6, which is go 100% with Black Whip, Danger Sense, Float, Smokescreen, and Fajin. Fajin is a quirk I genuinely dislike for its narrative implications. It only exists as a way to artificially inflate Midoriya's power level and acts as a band-aid for Horikoshi rushing the series to its conclusion. The of the series even affects what could have been one of my reveals. Truth of War for All made semi public. All Might and Midoriya, not just All Might, tried to keep this quirky secret for pretty much his entire existence. And it sort of sets up an expectation of something happening when it was public, especially as people get more and more towards the nature of Midoriya's power and Mishoto. We don't even get any widespread interest in quirk, as it is clear some pro heroes outside of the main ones know what the quirk is. The information from the press about Midoriya. You know who I was really interested in seeing react to One for All? Endeavor. The guy who spent his entire life chasing the back of that power. One that he would never be able to catch up to because it would permanently outscale him. We'll have later in the section, but wow, this one just fell super flat. I understand the point was that Midoriya is more than his power, and I agree with this conclusion. But I don't think having the class or anybody around him acknowledge power is contradictory to him. And it's very much in line with how MFG treats cast in the past as living, breathing people with thoughts, insecurities, and beliefs on things. This is something that contributes to my dislike of the villain arc. Characters just don't feel like anything. And if you agree they don't feel like anything's villain hunt, get ready to slap a new merchant title on yourself. Hello, drama merchants. If you want your characters to react to the events around them, then the positive side of the fandom sure to hates you. Class not really reacting to One for All is lame, but what is your borderland is that not having any complex feeling or thoughts on, I don't know, giant war that just took place. Tokugami found out his idol and mentor, killed a man, doesn't really seem to care. Nor does Midoriya, who is now grasping the idea of killing a villain.
Oh, right, I needed a hoe.
Care that they stumbled upon the corpse of their teacher, Momo, who she had the biggest relationship with. The same kid also lost her other teacher, Majestic, on the same fucking day. back at the first part of our perspective, where I talked about how we should keep in mind the class feeling like breathing characters of Kamino, which is why I touch on this is the decline of the cast that will be felt throughout the entire act. There are more characters to complain about, so of course we have to mention the character consequences. Or left us in quite an unsure state, with a bunch of characters taking serious damage. And considering this is a story where we followed every step of the way as a 16-year-old broke his arms to almost unusability, myself and many others were interested to see the payoff of these incidents. However, most of you might be aware that never really comes. Whether emotionally or physically, the arc that is supposed to serve as the aftermath of the war really undergoes. We go over our cast of injuries here. Let's see. Fox gets his back completely scorched off, as mentioned by Dark Shadow, and instead of having it will come from that, Fox just gets better. Of course, it's going to come back, but besides that, nothing really comes of it, and it will get worse later. Shigaraki's giant cave wave that a lot of assume killed 13. Nope, she's fine. In fact, nobody we actually know, minus Crust, so we still don't know because slapping a name on a nobody doesn't make us know them, actually died from it. And this is something I've talked about so much. When Torino gets hit so hard, blood sprays out of like every single hole in his body, and the ground underneath explodes. But he's fine, I guess. All right, let's see. Torino goes 100%, and the story dangles the seed of him being told to never do it again in front of us like he's a part of a baby. Just to go, just kidding. Strength is approved. Arms are destroyed. The explanation for this isn't even my problem, because the story of being reported or growing stronger and being more consistently makes complete in-universe sense. However, just because something makes in-universe sense doesn't make you have to like the narrative intentionally playing with your expectations to set up a more intense situation than it would have done at all, effectively reducing the quality of the fight in hindsight and yet another interesting consequence in an aftermath arc. We can avoid them, as well as randomly introducing a movie element that manga exclusive readers just straight up will not understand from off screen to further fix this issue. Let me think of some things that stuck. Twice is dead, that's for sure. I hope we get to see the villain cast react to that. Society is definitely now no longer functional, and Shigaraki is still body jacked by Alpha 1. Now, this plot point was met with some apprehension. It doesn't get that much focus. Alpha 1 himself does, and some thought this was a little retconning. The moment of all the factory act 1 of retrospective discusses the theme of passing the torch. All Might passes to Midoriya to be the next symbol of peace, and never passed it down to Shoto to live out his dreams, and Alpha 1 passed the torch down to Shigaraki to be the next symbol of fear, except never mind. Sorry, we pull this out to make sure people pay attention. All of that stuff about not taking course because they weren't suitable for Tomura, or internal monologue about handing it all to him just suddenly kind of goes away, and we're left to believe that this was the plan all along. Don't get me wrong, authors don't usually plan every single detail of their story down to the finest point, and it's good. Hawks, for example, wasn't outlined at all, and he is or was great. The difference here is that it feels contradictory to everything from Alpha 1. Alongside Endeavor overtaking Shoto, kind of makes the message of Pass the Torch feel hollow as time goes. Shigaraki got body jacked in chapter 295. By the time Villain Hunt wraps up, that marks a year since Shigaraki himself. One of the most interesting characters to someone who doesn't have the same weight as his own interest. He even goes against Morin's own characterization when met with Tarkus, the guy who talked about not being able to help himself when he comes across a good quote. But make one of the best quotes in the universe, something that would allow him to circumvent his body jack situation instead of preparing himself to survive, and ensure victory against literally anyone who knows how the K. The common response is that, oh, he didn't know who he was. Yeah, he did. And the other response is, oh, he doesn't know his quirk, and Shigaraki does, so he should. It's just a ridiculous out-of-character situation that destroys all for one individually. Midoriya are not the only ones that serve this quirk. Alright, I think everyone understood my detail. Considering that the Todoroki of the plotline not one of the biggest shakeups ever, following Aftermath arc presented a great opportunity for Endeavor and the character. That just states the darkness of his past to Toya, somebody who felt horribly beginning. He then faces his family in the hospital after the friend they found stopped Toya together, as hordes of people outside the hospital attack Endeavor. So Toya. The problem is that nothing really ever happens again. Endeavor just feels massively underutilized despite Dobby's dance being such a game-changing moment, and it almost feels contradictory considering how much of the spotlight he had for Act 2. We spent all this time with him, but it's a little bit just for him to suddenly fall to the face of the time says, watch me, proceeds to stand there and for Toya kills himself, doesn't do anything to stop it despite having his own trauma over this kind of situation. To make matters worse, for being a wife and child baby, the shit just sort of stops mattering to anybody around him. A massive bombshell dropped on the number one in the nation, and only the civilians seem to care. Of course, civilians are also drawn to Bob as light to make them look unreasonable for not liking what they did. The other characters in the series basically kiss the god who walks them. I'm not expecting everyone to turn against him, and it would be quite accurate to say some people with stomach working with him defeat all but one, but the issue is that the story never shows a people's stomaching working with him. The implicit acceptance and approval is done by never having any of heroes greater than the kids. That's what they're done. Seriously, go wrong. For what you say Bakugo, and literally anybody carrying that endeavor to a child kid. Now, a lot of Asian people, I'd like to explain this one. Explicit denunciation through dialogue or narration isn't the only way things can be achieved through like this. Overseas doesn't affect things can be achieved through narration, like a lot of urban Bakugo stuff. Things can be achieved through different meanings where characters that deserve to be punished for their like Italian, Indian Italian, and meditation. No one else fair to say, the way the rules are and the skills were too close. Never is the only one who suffers from this sort of implicit acceptance of actions, but unfortunately, Bugs did not survive that. It's really big emotional. Bugs, killed someone. One of the very few on-screen deaths in like Rex to be that's my character that ends better. We just almost never talk about it again until maybe the very end of the story. So my head is really more confident. Never be DJ, but anybody's a man before a bad situation where he's supposed to react violently, and then actually, of course, twice was a very hard weapon. That doesn't mean the word for a solution. That is twice a fight. Well, complexity and thought that would be such an encounter. What makes it age poorly, just like a lot of things in this arc, is the lack of any action about it afterwards. Knox kills somebody, and outside of some mild grilling at my press conference, the statement never comes up again. Not from Tokugami, who was like, oh shit, you killed a guy. Not from Midoriya, who was like, hey, how did you kill it? Instead, Hawks kind of becomes a nothing character for this final act, serving as a device to regurgitate super explicitly, have a collar pull the one by Endeavor and now, I'm not even someone who dislikes that he sided with Endeavor after I think that's a cool character decision. It's really served much more effective. Oh, he's optimistic, I guess. Kill the guy 2 months ago. Talk at Midoriya and let him give no response, ever. The idea that Midoriya was heavily infected by his treatment by Bakugo, people around him to be accorded with something about it. But the fandom believed for this very moment. Suddenly, we're just supposed to believe that more self-sacrificial and heroic despite Lionel and Academia's message of nature versus nurture being such a potent. It doesn't help that so much of Deku and Bakugo's relationship, stretching even as far back as Act 1, has been so completely one-sided and focused entirely on Bakugo's thoughts, feelings, and growth. So this moment was even more important for me, expecting Deku to finally get some sort of introspection and or reflection on Bakugo's treatment of him that amounts to more than, I hate you, but you're goated. Finally reaching this climactic moment and not letting Deku talk or think at all is in and of itself representative of the relationship I get in. Basically, Bakugo gets to dump all of this information on the kid he abused for years, and he doesn't respond in the slightest, not even in the stupid fucking math chapter, and Midoriya's character gets dumbed down even more. Not being able to formulate a single thought when it was most important, and seemingly being entirely unaffected by the years of marginalization and bullying, fully further during this chapter 7, or season 6, episode 25, to show its ugly face and knock him down a few more pegs. This chapter is representative of nearly every single thing making light of the actual trauma it had, I suppose put that to the extent. We go from all-night borderline suicidal, expressing reckless behavior towards stage 2, whatever the hell this is. This chapter completely ignores the apology Bakugo gave and ignores the trauma these kids underwent. Ignores Ochako's speech by making purchases false. It ignores one of the most emotionally impactful moments of Midoriya leaving All Might behind by resolving it with a gag and making All Might apologize to Midoriya and having Midoriya blame All Might not being there for his state, and then having the kids demand an apology from All Might too. This chapter just is a massive kick in the balls and demonstrates a lot of problems. Villain hunts more often than not prioritizes ideas over execution. The idea of Midoriya at its emotional low is cool. Shame if we executed it. The idea of dark people finally getting psychology is great. Shame if we executed it. The idea of being a god is cool. Shame if it wasn't executed as well as it could have been. The idea of keeping up with the top heroes is cool. The shame if it's practically not executed at all. Putting it all by separating the apex of the arc is an incredible idea for both of them. Shame if it didn't matter at all. Jesus Christ. This has been 8 entire pages of a Google Doc script of me saying this arc sucks. I want to make it clear that I don't actually dislike everything about it. I for elements that I do enjoy and think I'm to only talk about things I dislike about it in a video talking about the arc as a whole. But this arc has an incredible aesthetic, and in my opinion, I think more the next work in terms of art. Every single page is incredibly eye-catching, so it's an art that must have taken every job of pen. Incredibly in-depth backgrounds and character art make the arches of the art really shine. This and Mental Academia are absolutely. I also think that the societal collapse is portrayed pretty well, more or less. Antomachia's rampage was an incredibly well-executed nightmare. The city landscape being turned to rubble, the mass distrust that goes post-war begins a very adjustment that happens on the surface, functioning quite well now. No, despite my criticism of Deku vs. 1A, I can't tell you that it is a sweet moment. Full circle in weaponizing mental against him, and as a hero's job to extend a hand even when it isn't wanted, that hits, it's good. I know the mixed bag for me is the dog. But I dislike how quickly she came and went, serving for the series stakes by not getting to die when she fucking explodes. I enjoy when the series takes the time to delve into aspects of hero society like the state explicitly profiting off of crime and killing by threatening that status quo. The god is also just status quo over raw as hell. Damn shame that she was only created to be fridged for that, saying that other. What makes her status even worse is that Horikoshi originally hired volume of backstory for her. Another unfortunate symbol of My Hero Academia speak to the end. Another great thing about Villain Hunts was Ochako's speech, bringing MHA's message that nobody put alone to the forefront, and the idea that superhero celebrities are not untouchable gods, but they are just people. This is something that has been subtly showing up in all my beginning, and what makes it even harder is that it's a satisfying climactic moment for overarching protects the hero's plotline, signifying a massive step for Ochako. So, shame she fell asleep there. Only something. Speaking of All Might, he was great in this arc after losing his power and watching his ideology crumble for us. Put in a situation in Act 2 where he had to fight his down that's just really done. Aizawa tells him he needs to be him, and stated Bill Hunt the idea talking about August himself because strength was core that did All Might sympathies. The kind of person he was. Seeing the last person All Might saved go out there and statue really struck him. Until Shori finally looked at his past self, experiencing how the people around him felt about All Might's reckless attitude. Shame, yeah. Villain Hunt arc has two sides of its reception. First, there is the general reception, that is how the general fandom of My Hero Academia perceived the arc. The main way that we can quantify that is through sales. I should have said that Villain Hunt was the best-selling arc ever for My Hero Academia. So whether you just like or like art, sales or reviews are not an objective metric of quality for art. Definitely say that a lot of people enjoyed this. Great enjoyment sometimes also comes with great dislike. Reception of this arc in online space is every definition of the word. Some people think My Hero is the greatest arc of all time, but some people say that it's good as flaws, and some people like me will say that this is the worst arc in the series so far. The Hunt, alongside Season 5, which was going at the time, caused the biggest schism in the fandom. If you dislike the season, you can say that you so successful. If just like the arc ending, unironically cut right, people experience. This was the end of the spaces and opponent arcs will only proceed to make that worse. The arc just doesn't feel like My Hero. It feels like a rushed mess that no longer cares about its cast. It's established some of the stakes in the setup all for the sake of hype over substance. Remember in Act 2 during the war, My Hero Academia got an editor, Takashi, went on the big company to scapegoat for the scenes ever. Anything that if you were simply that. It's like anything about villains, she forces it upwards. That's enough about this tragic battle that showing hundreds of mutuals started countless bullshit shipping wars. Let us dive into the next message. Fortunately for me, but unfortunately for the viewer, my season 6 takes what he probably takes in the entire video. Some people, in summary, I find it to be the season of the show besides season 5 in terms of adaptation. I think the Paranormal Liberation Warlocks adaptation was genuinely very, very bad outside of a few select moments. Season 6 is largely an issue of scheduling rather than time. While largely narratively, scenes like Miracle versus Subnoku, Electricity Dude versus Nameless Electricity Dude got some pretty good treatment. Incredibly weighty scenes in the manga like Hawks versus Twice or Deku versus Shigaraki were more or less entirely carried by the voice actors' performances. You could argue the reliance on still frames in Hawks versus Twice is acceptable because it isn't as flashy as other fights, and I guess that would be fair. Personally, I was hoping for a lot more to go as seems far, but I get it. Deku versus Shigaraki is a completely unforgivable abomination of fight scene, despite being one of the worst things. Something about My Hero Academia's anime just feels off in general, and in my opinion, it's due to the animation animation Hero Academia post NBA felt like it had shit. Typically, much more serious to this, which I expect to be my extension from Act 3. I mean, it makes sense when we saw the pushing back towards the late point as they were something very fast. Followed up by the antagonist or the antagonist dynamics and then straight up mask for TPW. MJ anime, season 5 and season 6 actually seems a little serious. The anime still feels like it's trying to oh man, this show or fucking around aspect of the series was much earlier, never really expanding, adapting backgrounds, the sky, or lightning, anything. There was the series and entity. Instead of doing anything sources of schedule or status all we get is a latest within the series of still frames that they create manga panels and the series soy jack at us going, my god, just look, it's the manga panel, you're like, holy shit, please buy the new volumes, you can see it better quality. What really stands out to me in the really love community, shut the fuck up about it on Twitter, are those guys. No matter the intensity of the scene, no matter the moments, the copy used to fuck ass blue sky with the same stupid goddamn supplies over and over again. And then as played the anime. PLW has some of my darkest moments, and it doesn't even feel like the series tries to capture them. The only standout moments in terms of presentation. The lab scenes with Mirko, that were really sore throat. And the season said, well, it's the middle of the day, what are they supposed to do? Make the sky red? No, all there was a scene where the anime staff got to take creative liberties. Gee, no one? The sky is ever red. Deku versus Shigaraki were two scenes that I was most excited for adaptation, and holy shit, it bad. Look at the manga, every hit from Deku feels extremely, actually dangerous for Shigaraki. Hit these same hits and apply to the anime. First Navi's dance wasn't animated well, and Ochako versus Toga answered to directly super light scenes in the manga. However, the rest, a glorified PowerPoint presentation colored manga with little to no creativity. Second half of the season, Bill Hunt is pretty solid for imaging standards, offering the series' most popular opening so far, and well, it seems of the cost of the entire form. My Hero Academia's worst arc so far, indeed got the best adaptation. Didn't nail everything. The apology scene looked pretty bad, and in a more unpopular opinion, the Nakamura cut that everyone is ready for every season of My Hero Academia just didn't really hit for me. I'm absolutely not going to call this point. Not. I just don't think scene in itself, lacking a bit of impact and being a repetition of World Heroes Mission's climax, that goes slowly spawning like a shadow clone jutsu. Season 6 was an absolute letdown, mumbling some of the final good moments the series has left. A pretty solid adaptation to the series. Oh well.
Stars and Stripes feels like a major turning point. Like a lot of things, sort of right at the start of Act 3. she feels like an element that is so powerful and so impactful, or should be so impactful, that the moment her existence is mentioned, the story starts getting shaky. I get people have investment in the story. I get people have investment in the community, but at the end of the day, it is just fiction. And there are many times where I've felt like, he cannot act like aren't people behind these screens over the story. But that is exactly what happened. You've been your own, you've had your fair share of it. I've seen a lot of, the closer boys deal with it, and unfortunately, it became irreparable as time went on. The fact that she never came up before is not a deal breaker by itself. The fact that comes and goes as quickly as she does, with almost no shadow to her actions, or like long-lasting consequences beyond a few lines, I think that was extremely indicative of the style going forward, which is a shame because it also illustrated something that I think Hori is still phenomenal at, which is set pieces and imagery. I try to always encourage people to see perspective. You know what I mean? Because fiction will never be universally agreed upon unless it's like a genuine common sense type thing. Character arcs, developments of characters and plot stuff like that. There are a lot of people
I don't have
view
any
fiction, a lot of
pumpkins.
people see it differently, but I feel like those two sides are what create conversation as a community to be able to discuss the pros and cons of certain things, and that to me is constructive and productive. But I'm
There
saying
has to be
this
some
arc could
pumpkins so I
just take it
can get
forever.
seeds off of
She
nearby.
fighting Stars and Stripes on top of fighter jets at the edge of the stratosphere. Some of the rawest shit I've ever seen in anything. And it kind of makes me more upset that it didn't lead to more. She's kind of just a funny pickup story, but also, if you want to really read into it, this is the beginning of the end in more ways than
Here's what recommended works for so far. This arc became made at a very tumultuous fandom as it started the close of the series credibility and less suspension of disbelief. What this arc does is, this might be the funnest arc in the entire series. Well, not to sure, but enemies and things. Two positives of this arc out of the way. Shigaraki had the final struggle to get over his agency after just having is an interesting idea, and it was wrong. And that is, see, the Star Strike arc doesn't really serve any sort of story. Like, really, did she only exist to extend the deadline Shigaraki had before recovery? How about just make it wrong to begin with? She only exists to Shigaraki's power level by destroying a bunch of his works that he didn't even know. Well, then just don't give them those works. I also learned in a live lecture that she destroyed Shigaraki's regeneration, retroactively started Shrek a purpose, only for the same paragraph to say that he just got another version. I don't know. Again, so like, what the fuck? She exists to address why the heroes were getting no priority. No, that was explicitly by saying that now the hero public safety commission has fallen, certain paperwork for its 80 isn't getting done here as fast as it could be. Something that probably wouldn't change over Shigaraki's 7-day deadline. But she exists to show off Shigaraki and Ultimate's merger? I guess technically, but if she was removed from the equation, basically nothing would change. That's literally her existence summed up. If this arc didn't happen, what would have access to jets? I guess that's about it. Star Trek comes in out of nowhere, introduces one of the most powerful and moving groups of the entire series, and then dies. Number 1, K9. She basically makes course like magic. At one understanding that muscles, and of course, that's some strange deviations here and there, like the Chana or what it makes sense. Act 2 rapidly expanded what was really done with Valentine's such as message realms, or integrating chord factors further, doubling down on popping beats, a science that should fundamentally change the world but sort of doesn't matter. And then SNS comes in, adds a godlike power, and then lets chord messages fight each other? Whoa. Also, if you only has how is this not a big deal? Looks like the series just doesn't happen. Just on the introduction to the narrative with built by riches despite having ties to All Mights, and a what's seen height of power, and her being tied to a much of Shigaraki, so the story sticks out like a sore thumb. She was introduced to bring Shigaraki
I'm
down
pretty sure you're not allowed to use... Ah, there you go, a pumpkin patch.
setting it arbitrarily in the first place. And that is what is so mind-boggling about Horikoshi's decision to go beyond a quote, I want a Dragon Ball Z fight, end quote. All of the problems she was made to solve could be solved realistically by just not writing the story the way he has. What makes Shigaraki so powerful? So nerfed. But also, you don't even know him anyway. What makes Shigaraki competitive so you don't need to play his perfection? Star and Shrike is introduced to solve problems that didn't need to be solved, all the while showcasing a massive issue with My Hero Academia. It sort of feels like the control, no? This is like the consequence of the rapid release of Act 3 discussed earlier, as PLW left Shigaraki at an absurd power level. Sometimes from health deck 25% to pseudo 100% with all works. This arc introduces an almost all-powerful product, a shock plan and their all-powerful product. Shigaraki got so powerful. See, this arc has only introduced to earlier. It's true. So strong that a foreign threat had to be introduced. Multiple intercontinental ballistic missiles not to kill him. This is the true definition of merit. Only relation to your relative just not shut up. Very true form. Despite being all-powerful, Shigaraki does end up saving grace in this arc of sorts. Because he's cool, and I missed him. But also, he kinda sucks. We have now completed 11 sub-real lines of Shigaraki. If you're reading weekly, we're almost 40 chapters. Shigaraki is not the primary antagonist, and one is given careful. Star and Shrike arc is when we are introduced a mixture of all one and Shigaraki, or what we form call Shiki. Shiki, for one, pretty much embodies none of the interesting aspects of Tobara Shigaraki, and all of the uninteresting aspects of All for One. Two sections of All for One so far produced pretty much no else besides undermining the passing of the torch theme that was so strong in Kamino Act. What makes it even stranger is that it's really just happened. The statement with no implication whatsoever, All for One planning on stealing Shigaraki. You go back to Act 1, the narration, dialogue, and thematics of past the and the new generation accepting it and moving on past the mold of standard and basic generation. All for One was literally making decisions the Kamino arc saw Shigaraki All for One's own. Hence, this was Zootopia, talking about the genes. That's because Shigaraki decided to fuck everything up. It makes us reclaim an All for One character. If he wasn't planning entirely to group Shigaraki and usurp his empire and be the world's next symbol of fear, why did he not give himself regeneration? Of course, it wouldn't heal all the damage from All Might, but it could help. Invincible. If his plan wasn't to take the fall at Kamino for Shigaraki's world, then what was the decision? And also, to not take Vegeta's work. Was it really all just to cultivate Shigaraki's rage so he could take one for all? Why didn't Shigaraki work on taking independently by just gaslighting him further? No, it's not even gaslighting. For all, would it be Shigaraki's biggest obstacle? Just tell him to take it and hijack him? The melding of minds makes it no longer there to take it because All for One doesn't possess it and now occupies half of Shigaraki's mind? It doesn't make any sense. This potential of this arc is just astounding. They finally get involvement of other nations only for it to not matter. Get introduced to not only one world that being instigated, and she was also the symbol of All Might, yet we as their past. It was certainly one of the decisions of all time. An absolutely mind-boggling occurrence. And this brings us with one final big short arc. Women by you. This is a pretty unknown topic, and the introduction followed by a subsequent death of Star Shrike really only exacerbate the issue. Treatment of women in not just My Hero Academia, not just in shonen, not just in anime, but Japan as a whole, is an extremely in-depth topic that is likely not suited for a My Hero Academia perspective. Truth is, though, misogyny and treating women as trophies or objects is something that is still pretty basic in Japanese culture. Not to imply that they are the only issue with this issue, as someone would like to comment because someone does every fucking time, but the series is made by a Japanese guy. Important to have that context. Women in this series are an extensively discussed topic. Many people find the representation lacking in. Many people also think that some of their portrayals indicate that Horikoshi is a misogynist. My grand take is that I wouldn't say Horikoshi is a misogynist, more so that My Hero Academia has misogynistic elements. This can be seen in some of the girls' hero costumes, how Oshaka was like, oh, Jesus, I did so skin tight, just so or Momo's absolute abysmal costume. It can also be noted by Minetta's entire existence as a gag character, because the trend that it's totally okay to be a fucking. It's funny. But I think some people misdiagnose, however, that female characters in MHA getting absolutely bodied indicates some misogyny. Koshi. I would say, however, it's quite the opposite. Who getting destroyed or other female characters getting heavily involved in fights is a pretty key establishment. I think some people seem to miss. In my opinion, the most egregious example of the opposite being true is the arc. Every single fucking male character got at least a moments or fights in the overhaul arc, whereas every single girl was shoved to the surface, all of their moments getting off screen, or acting purely as and leaving the girl didn't have matches. Oh my, so fucking bad. Is Star Strike misogynistic by virtue of showing up and instantly dying? Probably not. I think it's more indicative of just a modern character like Ichi. I think it's cool when women get to involve the story. And a lot of female characters just sort of don't get to do it. Angelica was
What
more
does
inside
that mean? How do I grow, Rai?
screen time she was good, and in hindsight, she isn't even a character. Issues with screen time are not gender exclusive, and we'll get to that topic later in the final war arc probably. All in all, this arc is a waste of time, and not even a good one again. And while this arc definitely did damage the cohesiveness of the community, the two things that would follow
Around the time of the trader plot line was that the whole class disagreement, what happened to
Fucking
Deku, ends up being somebody that doesn't reach out his hand one time because, reality seeps in, you know what I mean? But we never got that. And sure, that led to the whole empathy merchant argument, I guess stuff. And, while I do have, it's kind of hard to say, like, you can't see where that person's coming from. Because Deku was always been a very empathetic kid, and that empathy is what has impacted a lot of people. But at the same time, those moments where he's not necessarily so empathetic and kind all the time, but are those moments that can really showcase that growth and that sternness of how things have developed for him and his life as hero.
Honestly, by that point, I was already pretty tapped out, so I wasn't extremely aware of what was going on. Because I read the chapters, I thought it was dumb, and I moved on. It was only later that I realized how much noise there had been. And this is probably the most controversial thing I'll say here. But I think there's a significant number of fans who are not fans of My Hero and not fans of anything. They are fans of discourse. They are fans of talking about stuff. And it's the only explanation I can come up with for the fact that even the smallest, most inconsequential disagreements get turned into these massive events. And that's what they are. They're events. They're things to keep up with. Keeping up with the Bakudekis. People are not fans of the manga or the anime. They're fans of the discourse it creates. The experience of reading a manga, of watching an anime, of watching a TV show has almost become secondary to the actual event, which is, oh, I can't believe what Twitter is going to be saying about this. And I think the Trader was a great example of that. I mean, all of Act 3, and frankly, all of My Hero has been full of that, but Act 3 has felt especially contentious because, some people really love it and some people don't.
It's gonna always be for a lot of people a missed opportunity and missed potential. You know what I mean? But it's definitely valid. It is definitely valid. It's a fine art. It's just an art that comes up short in many aspects, and those aspects are things that you just can't necessarily overlook, no matter how much you like the series.
this is My Hero Academia's worst arc so far. It basically serves to finalize the cataclysm of the MHA Online fanbase. This was a long-winded plotline that had years of misinformation spread about it, namely that Horikoshi forgot about the plotline. Hindsight, she actually wanted to do this content far earlier, back during Act 1, in fact, but the poor reader surveys during the Forest Training Camp arc, it got cut and moved half a decade later. Remember how I talked about how Villain Hunt and Star Strike felt like a fundamental shift in My Hero Academia storytelling? The series that respected its cast and slow emotional build-up to really strong cathartic moments. This arc is like the pure antithesis of that older style. Remember how back in the Act 1 retrospective during the Kamino section in particular, I told you guys to keep the class reaction to Midoriya's decision to save Bakugo in mind? It's finally time for some real payoff there. Because the class reaction in this arc is a two-pack of ass. Not only do we not get a single shred of development or progression from the class Villain Hunt, we don't get any in an arc that literally puts the class and their dynamics center focus. We get absolutely nothing about how Tokigami might feel, seeing as how Aoyama's actions directly sicko mode, potentially hurting his classmates. Absolutely no frustration from any classmates who were severely injured. Back, nothing from Suki, who was one frame away from being literally turned to dust in the USJ arc. and the one person who has a reasonable reaction in the room is somehow fucking Bakugo, and he's portrayed as the bad guy for disliking the shit that Aoyama has put them through. And the person who was affected the most alongside Bakugo, Midoriya, barely even cares. Nothing to say about him causing Midoriya to destroy his arms, nothing to say about him being quirkless. Midoriya becomes an empathy machine with little to no nuance. For this take is represented as it always does, I'm not saying Midoriya shouldn't forgive Aoyama and work to save him. That is absolutely a character for him to do. However, make your characters far less interesting with all of their negative emotions in the situation. Instead of being able to student cast here, like your academia opts to flanderize all of them, have them say, that is all in the past, sweeping away any actually difficult conversations on forgiveness or improvement in favor of this arc also served as the by the conflict of any interest character. Which is kind of right perfect speaking elements of that, and now the rest of what we're about Deku and rapid trade out of him turns course. This coupled with little nuts just makes it feel like that Deku's extremely counterculture ideology of saving the villains. It's just and at no point has he ever been challenged about it in the closest we got, where the message disagreed with his signature Rocky until they got over it, which bell rang, without having the message's ideology to fight him over it, without the class showing any potential disagreements over it, Deku himself never had a chance to come up with a plan or idea, except have in PLW, and we'll feel the effects of that in the next arc. Also, this might sound strangely contradictory, how hard they came down on Aoyama. Well, I don't think there was even enough for Aoyama. However, the child who's purely school is locked up like a dog while the wife reading child music together, and he's cool though, and talks the manipulative, and it's optimistic though. Midoriya and his chapters of setup called the entirety of Act 2. Final War arc is set by a whopping 30 chapters. Something that is kind of crazy to think about. Act 1, for its big climax, had 84 chapters of suspense building, character world building, state development. Act 2 had 160 started. It takes you a hell of a lot of time to set up content, character arcs, which that sort of what you see. And the length between MHA's first war ending and the second war beginning is 38 chapters. Almost half of the content the Kamino arc had in terms of build-up. This means that the end of the Trader arc that is supposed to serve as the segue into the story's literal last arc comes across as rather uninspired and bland, dealing with a couple of things fans actually wanted to see handled before jumping to the final conflict of the story, basically using a far more incompetent of PLW's premise, but instead lacking the build-up to experience that lacks the finale and grandeur that a final arc for something like My Hero Academia should have.
I will say that I like the structure of the final arc in the sense that there are multiple locations, multiple battles spread out with different types of strategies. But just solely looking at that, that doesn't mean that the execution of each of these areas are going to be as flawless as they need to be. The racism stuff, again, I think that could have been a good idea for MHA. I think it was a good idea for MHA to include something like discrimination. But again, with the lack of build-up throughout the series, outside of Spinner, mainly looking at the hero side, you know what I mean? It came up short, and it also really provided kind of like a very basic solution. Be better than this. Like, okay, yeah, obviously we want you guys to be better, but what is the insurance plan to ensure that them trying to be better is not taken for granted?
The moment where I was just like total clarity and oh, this shit is about to fucking stink forever was Bakugo and Headshot, because that chapter released and I was just laughing like at how stupid this was. And I open the app, the first thing I see is like a 7-tweet thread defending it, saying that oh, actually this is super thematic. And I think that was the moment where just I saw I saw this the singularity. I saw that there's nothing this manga can do to create a response in some people that I would consider adequate. And so at that point, I thought, well, what's the point of arguing with people? What's the point of arguing on the channel with people, making argumentative content? An author can create one of the most laughably idiotic plot threads that I've frankly ever seen in anything. And people will make threads defending it. They will create massive essays about how it's actually the greatest thing anyone's ever written. And it's like, well, that's that, I guess. There's no conversation to be had there. But, of course, this wasn't the only. I started getting really skeptical about the series. Basically, my theory returned in the first war. Because I thought that was just horribly mishandled. And then after that, it was just thing after thing. The press, which was just our the way the series was dealing with the six quirks and the way Villain Hunt was structured. And so by the time we got to stuff like the Trader and Bakugo, I was just so tired. Yeah, so it was sort of the big catalyst, I guess.
I think that Act 3 is a combination of good, the great, the bad, the ugly of MHA. A lot of it, I feel like, is Ori doing a lot of experimentations, a lot of it leaning more so towards the cooler and raw side more than Ori that a lot of people have grown to fall in love with, considering Act 1, Act 2 with his thoroughness on it now. I think that what is going to make or break this arc is, the end, the climax. And obviously that should be, the norm for a lot of arcs, but the whole thing about MHA is that for this hero story being more about just being the bad guys and throwing them in a cell, this whole thing about saving is very crucial if Horikoshi does not handle Deku and Shigaraki the way that not only it needs to be handled, but the way that I also, personally as a fan, just feels like it needs to be handled. Then, Act 3 as a whole might as well just be a bust.
This is My Hero Academia's worst arc. It also serves as the most weekly experience of the entire manga, not because the chapters themselves are bad, which they are, but because Horikoshi's health was at its worst ever. I mean it when I say I have never seen such an inconsistent release process from any manga in Weekly Shonen Jump. Multiple announced breaks, multiple unannounced breaks, that even caught the magazine off guard, meaning that MHA was still on the table of contents. Some of the lowest page counts I have ever seen, with 7 pages, all sort of leading up to a miserable experience for both the author and for me is when I was really burnt out on MHA the most. At the start, I was excited because I expected Horikoshi to really come back to his senses here because I believe finally see all the things you, all the scenes you execute, only to find out the things that you wanted to execute, fucking sucked for the most part. As the arc went on, I just made less and less MHA content until we were almost at the finish line. I couldn't even muster up more than an MHA video every couple of months, and at the time of posting, I haven't posted one in almost a year. This is a really big arc, so to go through with it, we sort of have to start at the beginning of the problem. To start, foundation of the entire war arc, which rests upon tricking off of a battle, relies solely on something the series established as a hard for someone not to be something. Shinso, way back when, was explicitly mentioned to not be a quirk, make other people speak, and the only explanation we have as to how he circumvented it is that drink really hard so that we can do it. So that the entire arc is just an asphalt for the sake of this arc is actually full of contrivances for the sake of it. That's what happens a chapter later when Toga, a girl with regular human strength, was somehow able to connect a portal and open the battlefield, despite him being dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than him. It's not as if he doesn't have full Cali active. Chapter 345, minus his speed, and see the lightning around him. For the sake of the arc, he had to not be active whatsoever so he could get hold of it. That was not the Toga, which was fine. But just because the moment itself is fine doesn't mean the execution is retroactively. It feels like Horikoshi has a lot of ideas, scenes in his head, and when it comes time to execute them, give a shit. He just wants to, smash the action figure. For instance, looks stupid. Back during PLW, we had expected his back to be completely incinerated as we were, despite character dialogue. It seemed destroyed, but just mostly, and now he's pretty much fine. In fact, they're so fine that Horikoshi was able to pull prosthetic wings out of his axe, because apparently we don't want to control those somehow, like with mind or something. Also, there were 40 ideas for Hawks in this fight against All For One, and remember he purchased wings with crisp, so he just went ahead and fucking annoyed. The entirety of the final act of Mighty Academia is like a desperate attempt for Horikoshi to get to this arc, all the things he wanted to do, but realizing he hasn't laid the foundation on the ground all of those things. Becoming a series that prioritizes the idea of how cool something might be, rather than the execution of it. Here's an example from a recent film. Horikoshi wanted to introduce the idea of Mita stumbling across the but never actually laid any of the groundwork for that moment. The dude, perhaps at all, mentioned killing some random grade school teacher with a camera shot. Something that is especially hilarious considering the series didn't even try to make this man as his feelings of grief for her death. I'm not entirely certain how to tackle an arc that is pushing 80 chapters, so I'm going to take this video step by step and talk about every battle and the respective characters individually, as nobody's examining again how it all holds up, inconsistencies, crevices, character assassinations. And this is a way to discuss how the series capped off these characters. Timestamps will also be in the description in case you want to keep everybody so plotline fights.
Oh, there's some things here.
What to examine is a cover in Hawks versus All For One. This fight was cool. It has stuff I really don't like, but I think it's fun. Hawks and prosthetic wings seems very stupid, but since this part during this fight is without the best, the CM ever encountered come against after being flashback. They have gone through so much of the series that it never can now be like flipping. He's getting his ass beat, so he pulls out his hero card. I was responsible for helping to some extent. We'll get to the backstory later, which will show stuff, but my initial impression is that it's alright. Although being involved in something again is it's also one of those things where I'm not enjoy watching them survive. And to bring us back into my demonstration, how many come challenge someone once they're still treading around. I'll be out of this ocean. Personally, they don't really care. I'm not here, but the students going to help out against one of the person. It's stuff moments like, oh, Jiro, don't move too much, your because it's rubbing on my back. It's like stupid. Anyway, let's focus on the actually good fights in depth. Brings himself in understanding his neighbor's place, where the circumstances that led him there all his faults. With all of this, with some of his fights, step one strong handshake. Next, he committed, makes me contextualize as he tells himself to not focus on the cursing of being is the limit that he wants to will everybody mistakes. But again, all for love for the fucking class, he accepted his best of being his penance, and let him have the future. He was just now to the baggage for the match. each other. Speaking of things being Arc rebellions, I can't lie, this is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. Back in the Star Strike section, I use a term called chord magic. I believe you when I say it was absolutely awful over no serious. We're supposed to believe a couple of things. One, that quirks and they feel inspired of things happening around them, they can act out. Second, they can act out. We have to believe that they can just do this and refuse being taken down an ammo message from the side. That means that at any before this was possible. That means that in the fight against the symbol of peace, the guy who freezes with his head like a watermelon, they can feel inspired to act out. Or any time before that. We have to believe feedback from being a little faster, that AFO will open his comically large mouth and bite you like a cartoon character. But isn't that only a good thing? Message goes away, which is weakened him. It seems like a good deal to me. Of course, we find out in the SS arc that AFO can't actually get rid of quirks, so Big Mouth do. Was it anything? Like, at no other point in history are we to believe the court decided, man, fuck this, and, get a little silly. Not over the hundreds of years that AFO existed, because while Horde would abandon explain why this can happen for people standing up to AFO, it's very clearly an asshole to make him a job in this fight. In fairness, there is a little bit of precedent when it comes to court messages interfering, and if only we knew how bad it is. While this scene does exist, they barely manipulate its makers, rather than actively cause a revolt inside of a spiritual realm. It's all about suspension of disbelief, and this one way too far. Speaking of suspension of disbelief, oh, yippee, all for one's rewinding, and never backs into a corner, beating the absolute shit out of him, and essentially put that door, because this is the weak version of All for One ever. And as he himself puts it, his body is just scrappy. Villains did indeed have access to the like bullets, and Dr. Garaki hadn't ignored them entirely, and instead of doing what overload bullets would do, was specifically factor and rewind that to nothingness. It targets the entire body to rewind it into nothingness, specifically avoiding the factor somehow. The question comes in, however, that if Dr. Garaki, a guy who is capable of reviving dead people, biologically super people, all might struggle with, why can't he not alter the destroying bullets to just not kill someone? Bullets are pretty big, but assuming the amount of the contents inside the body, might, if the internal is simply not if I'm awful instead of killing himself, not capable of necromancy, just not taking that, stupid. I also can't help but feel there were several better times with opposite. Of course, it's a backup measure that alcohol doesn't want to use, so it's not just going to instant pop it. Perhaps you remember when you clearly been left on the trap, that's the time to activate your Super Saiyan round and kill every single person around you. This bullet turns you into the strongest person in existence, as well as rewinding a is that? No. For some reason, when All for One takes damage, like faster, the fuck does it do that? That doesn't make sense about it. Whatever, it's fine. It feels extremely logical I refer to this point. I'm the smartest guy in human history. Wait until he's literally one T6 server packet away from actually, for real, dying. Alternatively, if he didn't want to risk it on himself because this bullet is pretty high risk, could you also just grab it while you're being barefoot by the only tank here killing you and, stab it, causing him to rewind to death? Especially because he's so much faster because not as old as All for One. My bullet just has a decent amount of issues, and I really hate to see, especially the video into this thing silly happens to Kuragiri. Later, a portal starts spawning 3 and twice clones as an offshoot of the total fights. Copy is also fun. As the battle descends to chaos, All for One's new goal is to beat Shigaraki minds into nothing, so successfully take over his body. So, what can we talk this? Well, All for One is on a clock, because every passing second is dropping a page. Surely, you can't get Shigaraki. Just kidding. Just stop and talk to these self-described extras every 0.1 seconds as possible in chat. Also, every time you make your headway. It's really important to Shigaraki while also getting slapped with, hey, All for One, today, and then you just indulge or something. Well, I want to make something clear before I don't want you guys to think this is going to be syntax. I think it's fine, but characters make bad decisions. Characters are human beings, are not notable for making the best decisions. I understand H2 All for One, because he is the mastermind character. And also, his lack of mental stability has yet to come. So this is supposed to be him at his most composed when it comes to decision making. Hundreds and hundreds of years of perfect decision making has led him to make so many hasty mistakes or decisions. Rather than feel like organic human fuck-ups, it just feels like pocket contrivances. Despite being in the most powerful state, he has made it on screen. Just exemplifies his profound actively things like every landing on anybody, especially Hawks, as the keeps cutting him off, using Shigaraki to talk to him. He all for one just stops to chat, never wanted to land a kill blow on him until he finally does, and then it's fake. This arc is just so ass. Our wonderful payoff for this terrible, awful, horrible gag. Return of Steve that manga probably not existed so that we could bump Hawks between. A lot of people focus on this cringe dialogue. It's super it's unfortunately what is substantially forced is actually not something. Not he also was simple and capable of putting a stop to sad brain. This feeds the understanding as this will stop it quickly, if not thousands, but twice. Just one question. Not put a prophecy so that we can obfuscate and kill a man, but instead, entirely said that on top of Fox's initial actions, twice again after murdering him, kill me what now, is over.
Oh my god, why do they keep getting stuck and fucking kissing each other? I know seeing food makes you guys horny, but please calm yourselves down until I can send you guys to the slaughterhouse.
That's just so nice. I already know what those things are called. I've already talked about this before, but I don't think he not so refuse to save the world because he hates Endeavor. I think he should be like, man, Endeavor is kind of a dick, but we gotta do what we gotta do. It's just a complete fumble of post-Dobby stance consequences, which is a shame because I'm chapter. This is despite what Endeavor is putting up Hey, sure, but just kept chugging. I realized how much they might be spite, and this is what leads us to the spite. Now, there are instances of spite, like first of all, I might fuck myself. So alright, some bastard. Obviously, he will come into play at some point, but as I say, it's just a very silly idea to send a guy who has overeating issues to fight that take place with. Yeah. We also just get more poignant scenes of people with them like not really caring about him dead, and making lighthearted remarks about them still supporting him. Again, it's at the end, and Horikoshi wants the heroes to be one continue. It's too bad. Just rushed right to the final war and had no time to extrapolate on interesting plot points. It was clear room for an interesting dynamic here. All of these rich and powerful people staying together to form a class solidarity, only really caring about propping up the symbol of money making. But instead, what we get is just look, I've written the script across like 1 year in my life, so I can move that part of this enough, so let's just move on. Overall, certain it looked good. Such an orphan, in fact, that it seems he might have been exactly like Victoria. This is currently not gone anywhere yet, so I'm not going to speak about it. It's final. But the implication that Alpha One also bet on the cheese on his life is extremely dumb. It's exactly what I'm referring to. They're talking about AMO being involved in every story, but all of that makes the world so small and fortunate connected. Things that don't help Image's world is everything having to be shoved in like extras, like the entire event that Alpha Bounty for the orphanage, the aforementioned polymesh that gives asbestos purposes.
Stability at last.
Story details hero adventures, noticeable degradation of ongoing times. Chapters that tend to be shorter and shorter, and sometimes they can break in every other week, sometimes suddenly. Your academia has inadvertently become a much more influential world. Space. This is what we is possible as long as they come together like passionate about the here. Execute episode relate to Odom, to Togashi. All of the being formed cheerful. This is what they had for street does they just allowed to happen. Especially when publishers can over unacceptable circumstances which show up. Is it possible that some of you that talk already consider on results of the actually this reads like a less just me. As even other artists tweet out what you help forward. Same guy who wrote the arc about what you saw ever occurred to you, never gives you some time to rest. The show forward had nightmares of my direction, speaking of priority, and older chapters. Unfortunately, at the very end, exploiting the practice of the show jump back to my direction. Despite what a lot of chapters are being put out for the sake of getting a chapter out. Which is as it was already. I know check it let's actually talk about the good parts of this level. Tail end of this fight has a lot of projection coming from Koya on the show as he refers to him as a half-baked puppet that will pretty much anything. Writing on the wall for that one. It's really the character model of Shoto as he hears this story of able to do something that has been a long time coming. Flows both fire and ice on both sides, in a sense, by creating cold fire that flows through his veins. Comments and a mentality like that are not things that will be Shoto. In combining the two sides of himself, he struggled for so long to save his own. This is his power. It's out the 23rd age as the usual imagery of a child toy reaching out Shoto, and he unleashes a massive great age. Aegir refers to seed, also is represented a really old Icelandic poem from the 10th century, which talks about the life of the sun who died during the storm at sea. The author talks about losing the sun by slaying the sea. It's also in reference to Einjamar, a symbol of both power and action. Power is Shoto's whole thing. Glacier is in reference to ice. Action is in reference to saving himself. Just like that, we have to go. Uh-oh. For the sake of transparency, this fight actually takes place like 25 chapters last month, but I'm doing this now for the sake of flow. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this fight, but I don't hate it. Zombie and Endeavor finally come face to face, and Endeavor has
Oh my god, I have a villager trying to live in my house.
threatening to blow up the entire surrounding area, evacuation line that we just so happen to Quickly on the battlefield, perhaps not the best call. One of many strange calls being reported back. So let's just get this part out of the now. It is indeed related to Ray. I have said multiple times in the past few and yeah, here it is. My gravity can act the world smaller by connecting all of its minor cast members to each other. Massive fibers with multiple powers. Yeah, I really don't like this reveal, especially considering this is probably the last thing Daniel will ever do. And also Mr. Compress, who had this massive reveal chapter and has been in prison for the past 100 chapters and counting. Tommy was able to recreate Shoto's special for some reason. Oh, he has ice. That's interesting. Even a lot of people, unlike DirectD, and still are a bit weirded out by this development. There's inventory and infinite surrounding things he should briefly survive, and it's not like he's making giant Shoto ice ramps. It's just enough ice to keep his internal organs from bursting. If the criticism is that it just sort of happens and that's it, yeah, I can agree with that. Endeavor's own reckless abandonment of his child never let him experience this moment until Toya on the verge of death. Toya copies Shoto's ability just after the latter proved he is his own person, and it's an interesting way to show his lack of identity. It's correct. It's just kind of a copycat poser, but taking it but twisting it into fatality. Dobby, for example, got us to start with Stain. Someone who wanted to massively disincentivize these selfish theatrics and heroism, yet Dobby's entire thing is about selfish theatrics. So him co-opting Shoto's move does fade in line with this idea. I don't hate it, I don't love it, but seeing afterward of Endeavor and Dobby having a tangle of flames is so incredible. As Endeavor takes full responsibility, he decides to sacrifice himself to save everyone else. This is an interesting choice for two reasons. One, I think Endeavor dying as the partner kind of fucking sucks. For similar reasons why I don't like All Might dying, I think that as partner just doesn't work. In a story about self-discovery and atonement,
He's decided to.
at the end of the day, he had nice, both really boring and also massive cop-out. What matters more in this type of arc is living to see it all harm the cause, and B, make changes to better yourself in the situations you can cause. That is a way to avoid the hard work that comes. Not only that, but my hero Academia was adamant about, hey, don't kill yourself, dumbass. Midoriya pushing on despite his horrible circumstances was bad. All my wanted to do despite his massive great as a bad decision, even though of course it had good outcomes. And thankfully, my hero Academia stays consistent here, and Endeavor tried to kill himself in as in response to Endeavor's polo pulling himself up in the sky,
What
the
the?
entire time shows up to stop him. Now, like I was saying, Neville showing up here is pretty much wrong. It's contingent on the film being so bad that evacuation happens about 3 years. So there's a level of being contrived as a result. It's similar to how the series started because being contrived with catalyst always doing it. Obviously, we'll accept this because the matches are really good shit. Also, yeah, the entire series. In this case, I must say it's kind of worth it because the safety is it's also nice to see parallel to the play and fight, where Endeavor took the sky to her ways to his possible, their stopped to save the world. It's been done enough hijack, online, so to have the entire family show to put stopped away in his place. Nice parallel to Sakura Peak, showing what could have happened if it wasn't fractured by Endeavor. They all deserve to be here. Of course, one person is missing. Shoto and Ida will come with their fights, and we finally find out why Ida was out here. Made some of the contrivance, pyramiding and Shoto, by location, but it's not. These partners never chase the manic relevance of no man. And you should rely on those. Especially as
Shit.
we reminded that he is being discovered to Shoto had not seen it, Toyota when he was frozen. And Danny, that was in the explosion.
It is winter. My crops won't be growing anytime soon. Damn, that kinda sucks. Also, wow, it's midnight. I should really go. spider spawner then.
This is My Hero Academia. Sick. Genuinely, nothing at the current date time reaches this level of awful, and it's likely. Let me set the stage for viewers at home. For seemingly no particular reason, All Might decided to send almost every minority in MHA to go fight the other minorities, despite having absolutely zero character relations. Spinner and Shoji, nothing. Spinner and Koda, nothing. Shoji and Koda, nothing. Bucklock, why is he here? All of the slant his heteromorphic action figures together, but heavily influenced that he would not go for this, and hastily gave Shoji a backstory to half-assedly connect Shoji and Spinner at the 11th hour. In a worrying trend, disappointed conclusion, our antagonist has been turned into a blubbering monster, as becomes clear from the points that Horikoshi doesn't know his directions. Could be an exception for Dami because he would dash, but to written childlike cries of die and calling for his dad. Basically, there is a massive line of people that are tired of being treated the way they are. Flashback in the first retrospective, how even non-heteromorphic quirks like Shinso's brainwashing create these slaves towards the and it was stated multiple times that people like Shoji have been particularly bad. Like on that furry girl, the network is called Monster. It's very, very clearly allegory that one here. Heteromorphic discrimination is Horikoshi stated, but racism is a layer of separation to make it a little less on the nose. So if heteromorphs are very restated racism and are on the surface, rising up against the Muslims who fights on behalf of the state of rights, also as a result of attention to decades, and they're portrayed as turning into a attacking world to show me. I wonder what should be referencing those protests as opposed to now, a lot of people are in severe denial about this because he's gay, so surely he would never reference American media, despite the fact that she is clearly very invested in American media and American aesthetics. Understands pretty well how it comes forward and made an entire manga that is clearly heavily inspired by American comics. Yeah, absolutely not. Look, let's set aside the fact that authors take inspiration from other nations' history and events literally all the time, and it's only Japanese authors that are infantilized in this regard. And let's accept it on its face that Horikoshi would surely never reference America. Some people use this as a further shield to say that we are really just being specifically America-centric about this plotline, and Japan just doesn't have the historical baggage of racism like the US does, which is not one-to-one, but Japan definitely has racism. Ask the Koreans in Japan how things are going. Here's the thing. Even if Horikoshi did potentially try a parallel here between the Federal riots and the US riots, it doesn't really matter. That also some unconscious feelings when creating art, hence these statements about all art being political. No matter what, if you dive into the social or historical or cultural or political context surrounding art, you understand quite a bit of its creation. Picasso is a super famous people. Someone could for real look you dead in the eyes and tell you this piece is political, and for someone without any art knowledge, you can see how someone could be conclusion. However, Picasso painted this in direct response to the bombing of Guernica, becoming a worldwide known piece that helped bring attention to the Spanish Civil War. So, while you can use this to take away nothing, if you look beyond the surface for more than 15 seconds, you can see that this piece was influenced by historical context. My Hero Academia takes its analogy between the US riots and this series of events, and further, by dismissing them of their outrage and instead focusing it solely on the fact that they are attacking, that big quotes, a hospital. I put it in quotes because they don't really damage the hospital itself and don't attack any staff. In fact, there's a scene where the doctors stand up to the rioters and they just go in a different direction because they had no intention of killing these people. Just like real life, the discourses surrounding the event was hijacked to shine light on the potential property damage of the riots rather than the loss of life that was experienced. That Horikoshi highlights in the same set of events by creating a list of genocides that didn't exist until 5 seconds prior in the universe and are all Star Wars references. Durkheim was a French sociologist active in the early 1800s, and he was especially known for an idea that he proposed that was particularly fine. That crime is a lot more less than bad people doing bad things. What crime does is show that humanity that would not be met by the status quo. Instead of writing off criminals that are among them, they might have already shown them to the integrity. Finding what conditions of social life were met is crime as a creature or finds both in life and in My Hero Academia are the results of decades of racial frustration, and when your entire life has been essentially defined by the suppression, the optics of your retaliation become relevant after you accept this empowerment. can examine the usage of visuals in the plotline as well, because obviously manga should be. The way the writers are drawn is very inconsistent with how the series portrays people wrong, like we touched on earlier in the plot arc. Obviously, we want to see the conclusion here. Writers are doing a bad thing, and of course, writing's bad. Violence is not an ideal agent, but as we touched on earlier, there is a tend in terms of mass social retaliation like this unprompted. This plotline also shows a hilarious lack of nuance by having multiple characters say that by living in the city, other heteromorph characters wouldn't have experienced discrimination. While it's true that cities are diverse melting pots, that diversity also includes opinions and statements. And obviously, if you spend
What's with the level 0 max thing?
Cities. Morikochi's mouthpiece, Shoji, would criticize the writers for having no plan, just attacking the hospital to break current theory. As student hero noticed, heroes did not fucking do anything either. They knew about the attack ahead of time, enough to put them here, but did not evacuate any of the patients, the doctors, and never occurred here. It's not like mass evacuation would have been an issue for them, as the entire premise of this arc was founded on them placing a court to mobilize the hero army instant. So this plotline has multiple fundamental failings. Its premise is shit, its real life politics are shit, and its character writing is shit. It's just like everything else, some people go out of their way to defend this plotline. The common argument that people are just trying to argue with to real life issues in race dynamics, and surely Horikoshi never had that working on this. As I've discussed at length in my current argument, all art is like artists' life experiences, so too the viewer's perception of that art. Even if Horikoshi never intended for this plotline to be read through the lens of someone like the U.S. riots, the fact that it can be done so accurately is proof enough that there is something fundamentally wrong with Horiko's analogy. The second defense is that this wasn't a direct response to U.S. race riots, but just to the fact that people were conned by awful rules. Personally, this is largely irrelevant, and honestly can read way too close to anti-Semitic depictions of, and the narratives or other narratives about minority groups not knowing what is in their best interest. While criticizing the mutants for having no plan, Shoji tells Spinner that he too was persecuted, and though their actions are not justified, there has to be a better way. The new antagonist, Horikoshi, that was asked in this plotline, disagrees with Shoji, saying that he offers no other solution, and that this is a pathetic right of his own. They refer to this idea as childish naivety, and for some reason, Horikoshi decided to portray this guy as if he's a fucking idiot. Action lines, his eyes bulging out of his skull at wrong. Also, discuss this. Shoji's lackluster response is that because of the actions here in the hospital today, their children might be the next targets of discrimination, and all I can think is they already are. Shoji himself, in his own backstory, was the target of a hate crime. It's possible any of these hate crimes that Horikoshi has asked, even for Star Wars references, also could have been children. Children, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged people, and elderly people are all likely targets of discrimination. Seeing as how nothing about the curse as core of the story was showing any indication that changing, equally as likely this generation's children would also be victims. Another funny scene is when Shoji is told the class's backstory in a flashback because, well, for including things chronologically in modern-day My Hero Academia, he tells Koda and Tokoyami to understand racism because of the city, and leaves out Mina and Suyu, Mina, the girl who gets called Raccoon Eyes, and Mineta apologizes for calling Shoji an octopus, but not for being sexually threatened. It's a funny little thing. Anyway, this plotline more or less wraps up with Shoji telling these writers that instead of standing up for themselves, they should simply expose racists until racism stops. Surely that will work. This is actually a piece of real-life rhetoric known as, quote, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and refers to the concept of simply putting a spotlight on problematic elements so that they go away. This is a solid line of argument if you are a 40 or a 37-year-old Japanese man. Allowing people to be openly and violently racist and break them down, that's literally never worked. US being a nation very atrocities of the intolerant yet, in modern day, only seize power and actively use of people. The solution is to shine a light on them, it's effective, sunlight is stronger. A study by Richard Rogers called Deplatforming Following Celebrities on Social Media follows highly popular cases of average children. Outputs who have been swiftly and effectively sphere, and with that, their audience revenue has been reduced as well as their potential reach. It also helps to demonstrate a shift in what is considered acceptable on social media at times of content and individual. Of course, My Hero Academia is a children's manga and children read it, so it isn't obligated to go like race dynamics for children. even though we not need pretty cool. However, I could also argue that children first gives the author more responsibility when it comes to portraying this topic well, especially when nobody forced Horikoshi to make a racist plotline to yourself. If you're going to write something like this at all, you should look at watching Fox News, and that goes doubly if you're writing for an audience of primarily children. Also, are you writing for an AKK? Wrap up this shitty, terrible plotline, you are criticizing the mutants for acting out against oppression, and they should have found another way. Isn't it really funny and ironic that this riot is what caused evil discrimination in the limelight of the story, effectively making it active for characters, and references, and now it's a primary plotline that Ori felt that he was back on probably addressed in the final arc. So even though he's so bucks about how writing is bad, the riots worked. It's like real world riots. Writing him. Anyway, they push in and we get some okay standard characterization, and then Kurogiri wakes up. Yeah, but shit, man, let's just move on. Across the battlefield, while Shoji fumbles the bat, Mitsumakia arrives on scene to overrun versus everyone fucking Japan fight. At this point, I realized, oh, it's just a fish version of MW. Correctly, the plot is what the rest of the activated their flashback to explain why things are happening. On top of the Mitsumakia plotline with me and Kirishima, it seems Mitsumakia and Kirishima throws the year later. Kirishima saved her.
It's winter. Right,
I saw this scene as
need to find Amethyst Geodes now. And I'm finally done having stability.
Against the Mitsumakia, and that lasts about 2 pages as she laments me. Absolutely nothing before or after. That's what tries to make the sequence conflict. It's killer, actually, something. Now the Mitsumakia is desperate to get back to all the money. It's brainwashed by Shinso, who stays in party, and he's never seen again. Mitsumakia gets brainwashed into arriving at the battlefield and attacking all the money. However, Shinso's power did not get an off-screen upgrade to his ability, so when AFO shoots one major attack at Mitsumakia, quick stop. Plot twist, Mitsumakia really is mad at All for One, even though he wasn't mad about it 3 page turns ago. He decides that now is the time to behind him, and not the past few months or the multiple years alone. It's the scientific definition of an asshole. No build-up, unsatisfying, and a massive contrivance that isn't worth the content we get, especially considering that a few page turns later, Mitsumakia gets one shot by All for One. We do, however, get some new information that I'm bringing up for a reason. Reason All for One was to attack so hard to the point of blowing himself to pieces is a twofold issue of SSH unconscious mental Shigaraki, and supplies, meaning that Shigaraki teenager has more of an effect on him, allowing him to quick passes of it and attack more of it. As he realizes, he let us play around in front of Fox and takes his point. This is really fucking lame. Consequent Fox was important for killing twice Tadabi, of all people, held way more thematic emphasis than AFO could be responsible for it. The metaphors of flying too close to the sun, or losing him after making a questionable decision, further shows many similarities to Fox's backstory being all came together with Fox's character going forward, and too bad though is he covers it, and then he just lost his work anyway, so kind of did all this for nothing. That about picks up the lightning round section. It sucked. Let's move on to something that can actually be good. Despite, let's turn back the clock a bit, and by a bit I mean Deku was arbitrarily pulled and arrives on the scene of Ochako. Toga begs Deku constantly. This movie, Danger says is 50% for Toga. Because Toga loves Deku, it's her way of showing affection. There is no danger to sense because she has no hostile intent. This is what making the line that basically immediately turns Polly to fail in the eyes of Deku. I want you to be my boyfriend. A woman has a crush on a man, therefore the West is fallen. Of course, I'm not going to deny that this is a really cool way to deliver this. MHA is pretty known for its corny delivery, especially in this Ochako plotline, but it's also really not the end of the world. It serves a greater purpose than it's used as a way to dive deeper into love. As she says that turning into someone else is all about love. Midoriya outright rejects her, telling her that she was all like, but couldn't imagine she shared the same heart behind the scene. Just like back in PLW, Tokyo faces rejection, so she comes to that this is her last stand. As usual, Deku wants to solve the situation right here, right now. Deku might punch into her smash and help it, but that's a big and dirty story. That sucked. Also, it's so chopped the plotline, so she just asks Deku for minutes of consideration, accepts the major battlefield, which is actually mission on the team not shouldering it. It's more Cody lines, but as usual, there is more than one guy. Alpha Choco declares to Toga that she knows how she wants, but still has the preference for how she feels about Midoriya. Now, I can see her, so Choco is there's a lot to be said about the common sentiment around Ochako's character. A lot of it can be summed up by you just didn't. Not to imply that Ochako is the apogee of creativity
Yeah.
or standard storytelling.
Winter
because
sucks.
She is very laughable sometimes and fighting. But a logical perception of her plotline reads like a pretty double standard. Get you to Akatsu from JJK all about love, and he's called raw, go swag. I think the fair use of one of those swag. That same consideration isn't Ochako at all. It was also about love. Not necessarily the same aspects. The common criticism is that because she has a crush on Deku, that she's a standard female shonen character, it is too accurate. I think it's one of the line with female early acts. Antagonist, it's really activist. It's just a bunch of female characters who would be in an effort to become a female characters in a genre where they generally get the short end of the stick. We have circled back to also punishing what they consider traditional femininity and praising characters like Nobara and Kugisaki because they exhibit literally simply short